And we're live. Man, I guess now you got to hit two buttons to go live. Used to you just hit the go live button, you go live. Man, they've changed StreamYard a little bit. Some improvements. I didn't spend any time going over it the last few days, but definitely need to. So while everybody is staggering in, I guess I'm going to share these links. I'm not going to be able to see you if you post comments. And for that, I apologize. Get my link and I have to hear myself talk because I don't have my headset on. So bear with me while I share these links. Hope everybody's having a good week so far. How many's going to Maggie this weekend to the Summer Jam? Should be a good time. I was going to go Thursday, but I decided to wait until go Friday. The Thursday pre-party is a really good time, but that's just $200 more that I got to spend on a room just to go to the pre-party, and yeah, I don't see that happening. I love everybody, miss you, but answer a question in the chat. All right, that's cool. Now it's gonna pop up in every one of my windows, causing me some lag. So I'd open up all these windows to share to, and then I get a message. It's in every one of them, and it lags. This looks pretty interesting. Just give me another minute, and I'll be done. And I'll do like last week. The ones I don't get early, I'll send a link later to. That way they can watch it later this week or this weekend or whenever they take a motion to. In fact, most people don't watch it until most people don't watch it live. Most people watch it, I guess. They're listening to it on their way to work or watch it while at work or on their lunch breaks or whatever. But I'm just glad they're able to get the message, and if they got questions, they know where to go. A few more links. I don't think it's going to let me do a whole lot more now. Maybe one or two more, hopefully. Yep, I know. Okay, so we'll send it to those three later, or those four later. All right, what's going on, Clint? Brother, I tried to get up with you. I looked on YouTube for you, and I couldn't find you on either one of the the chats that we have on YouTube. And I looked for your name with your little skull and crossbone pic. Could not find it anywhere. Try to find me on Facebook. I don't know if we're on Facebook friends. What's going on, Damon? What's up, brother? Yeah, I'm not gonna be able to make it. I'm not coming tomorrow. I'm gonna come Friday morning. It's another day, another $200. Another day of hangover. I'm just getting too old. Are you on in the militia, Clint? What's going on, Curtis? Who do I look like? Can't be good. Like Steve. Well, I'm in the militia. I'm one of the admins in there. So let me look you up on real quick in the militia. Now that we got you in there. I don't see you on the Moonshine Militia group yet, unless you're still. Did you answer all the questions? Let me. Did you use the same picture on Facebook that you got there with the skull and crossbones, Clint? I can search you on Facebook that way. Can you ever use too much yeast? Yeah, you can over yeast. Yeah, it can be kind of detrimental. I mean, you just get more yeast and you get overpopulation of yeast, and it causes it to kind of go a little too fast at first, and then they tend to overbreed and die off quick. But it's probably, if you do just a little over, it's probably okay than to do a little under. But flavor, if you get way too much yeast in there, it can start affecting your flavor. Okay, I'll find you, Clint. Let me look real quick. Sec. Pop. All right, I found it. All right, let me see here. All right, I sent you a request, brother. We'll definitely get you in the group. I don't see you in the group, but I'm going to send you an invite from the group once you accept my friend request. Did you get it? Yeah, I got you, brother. Pop. All right, let's see here. Um, all right, let's see. I'm gonna have to figure out how to do all this. So I can get you in for sure. Yeah, I don't see you on here, but we'll take care of it after the show, brother, for sure. And I'll send you one from both groups. Did you get my friend request? What's up, Jeff? I know, brother. I'm gonna miss Thursday. I really regret missing the pre-party, but 3 days of drunkenness is hard on an old man. Going on, Richard? Yeah, I'm gonna be on night. I'm gonna wait until Thursday or Friday morning. We're going. Damn, mosquito in here. Oh my God, I hate him. Yeah, for sure. Can't let him get out of sight. Not on me, damn it. That's the way. Yeah, gotcha. Man, I can't stand mosquitoes, man. They'll put a whelp on me. I hate them damn things. Yeah, I'm gonna go Friday morning. Man, I'm gonna go up Friday morning. Going on, Gordon? Yeah, yeah, Kirk. Generally speaking, they'll tell you how much usage per gallon. You know, a tablespoon per gallon sounds about common. Uh, Different, you know, maybe some different wine yeast and daddy. Sometimes they'll tell you to use a little bit more, and I think it's just so you can use up the product and have to buy more. But you can actually get by with a little bit of less if you use a yeast starter and just start it in a jar with some 95-degree water or so, and you know, put some sugar in there, about a third quarter cup of sugar, and you know, fill it up to about, you know, quart jar up to about halfway, and then put your yeast in there, put the lid on, shake the shit out of it, then take the lid off. Do not leave that lid on there or it'll blow. And set it in a bowl or something, a big bowl, because it'll tend to foam over. And you can put a towel or something over it and just leave it in a warm place. And it just kind of like doing your bread for bread, you know, same thing you do for, you know, starting your bread. But let it work up and foam, and that'll do two things. It'll let you know that your yeast is still viable, and if you shake it up real good, it oxygenates that water real well, and that super oxygenated water gets them to breeding quickly. It turns them into the breeding cycle, which is why it's probably not good to stir your mash, you know, halfway into it or, you know, towards the end of it. You don't want them to go back into breeding cycle. You want them to stay in that eating and pissing alcohol cycle. Yeah, I know. I'm gonna be headed. I'll be there. Oh, I wasn't scrolling. Time to pass you. Yeah, I'm gonna be on tonight, Richard. I hope you're feeling better, Richard. Awesome, brother. Yeah, we'll take care of you, Clint, after the podcast. We'll definitely take care of you. I'll send you the moderator from DIY Shine. Definitely need you to help me moderate that for sure. Awesome. Damn, I thought I sent double, Richard. Seeing it in both spots. Kind of after last week's episode, it was a good episode. We talked about enzymes and how they break down starches and stuff, and had Wayne from Ozark still works on here, and we were talking about diastatic power and how to. I'll be damned if that's another mosquito or I missed him. We were talking about diastatic power and how much malts to use. Now it's becoming less and less critical these days to do the calculations and all that, because a lot of people just using the liquid, you know, amylase and stuff. So not a lot of people really depend on, you know, the calculators to do that. But I don't know if I explained it well, but somebody, you know, a couple asked questions about. I guess I was a little vague when I mentioned 30. That's the diastatic power that you need per pound. So, like for example, we had let's just say 20 pounds of corn, right? And we're trying to figure out how much, let's say 6-row to use. And hypothetically, I know 6-row is a little higher, but let's just say it's 150 to make the math. Well, we can say 160. Hell, I'll break out the calculator. So it's 160. So we got 20 pounds, and 20 times 30 is 600, right? So you just take that 30 I was talking about, and you need 30 per pound. So you just multiply 30 by every how many pounds of corn you got, right? And that'll give you 600. So we got 20 pounds of corn, and we got 30 times 20. So 30 times 20, there's our 600. And now, so we've got a 6-row, and it's, let's just say 160 diastatic power. So we take that 600 divided by 160, and that tells us 3.75. So we need about 3.75 to 4 pounds of 166-row, right? Okay, let's just say we're, well, I'm going to use some 132-row. You know, most of it I think is 140, but let's just say 132-row. And also, I would say go ahead and use 4 pounds instead of 3.75. Round it up, give it a little extra just to make sure, and to make sure you get a better conversion. So 30 is the magic number to remember. So let's just go, okay, we got 30 pounds of corn this time. We got 30 pounds of corn. Okay, 30 times 30. So we got 900, right? So we're going to use, instead of 6-row, we're going to use some of this really good tasting 2-row, but it's not real strong. It's only 100 and maybe 40. All right, so let's take that 900 divided by 140, and that gives us 6.42 pounds of 2-row, so 6.5 pounds of 2-row to do it. So just remember 30. 30 is the magic number, and it's easy just to do the division. Just remember you need 30 per pound. So every how many pounds you got, you multiply that by 30, and that tells you how much diastatic power you need total. And then you can divide it like wheat, for example. Like if you got a malted wheat that's 180, right? So we got 50 pounds of corn, okay? Big full bag of corn times 30, okay? That's 1,500, okay? And let's say we're going to use some of that 180 diastatic power wheat that's been malted. And this is if it's malted, you know, like we were talking last time, it's modified. And, you know, modified malt means it was done by a malt house, and all that malt is perfectly malted, right? It's all at the same rate, right? So it's all malted to the same exact point, and they measure it diastatic. When most of us do it at home, we undermalt because not all of it's perfect. Sometimes some of us, you know, we'll get it perfect, but sometimes some of it's not malted, and you have little roots coming out of it like that. Sometimes you got big ones coming out of it, and you know that's under malted, means it wasn't really perfectly malted, so it's under modified, right? So let's anyway, 1,500 divided by 180, and that tells us we need 8.33 pounds of that 180 diastatic power wheat for that 50 pounds of corn to do the conversions, right? So that helps with that. Now, one thing also that we talked about that you can do, and probably should if you have liquid amylase, it takes very little to use it. When you use it, it takes very, very little. Let's see, we got some questions here. Colitis, chronic colitis. Didn't I just talk about that a few weeks ago? I had chronic colitis too. I also had gallbladder issues, and they think I get irritable bowel syndrome. I think that's just a catch-all for whatever they can't figure out. Yeah, it was a pretty good episode. Thank you, Richard. I enjoyed it, and I think it was pretty informative for a lot of people because I love the science of it, and I'm really amazed at how those enzymes break those, you know, glycosidic bonds. You know, those are pretty strong bonds, and how it uses water to snap those into debranch, cleave is what they call it, to cleave. It's amazing how that works. It just amazes me how one bonds to the positive hydrogen ion on the water and another one to the negative hydronium ion, and then they bond to that enzyme, and just then they just snap that starch right there at that cleave point. Man, it's amazing how it works, and hydrolyzing. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, and right, Richard. So if you're doing that, well, let me get to this question. Do you need to add malt to my yeast for moonshine? Now, the malt is basically an enzyme that breaks down starches. So I wish you were here last week, but let me pull up some charts for you, and we can explain it to you real quick. And I can use some of the pictures from last week that we used. I'm not going to do a whole full screen thing with it like I did last week, but if you can, Michael, if you can go back to, let's see, it's 4 days ago, I guess. Was it? Let me see what day that was. That would have been the 19th. If you want to go back to the 19th, I highly recommend it. It was a real good episode, and it deals with the science and how enzymes break down starches, right? So in a lot of the grains in what we're converting, so we're taking all these grains, and we're leaching the starches out of them, right? We're heating it up, gelatinizing, and busting all the stills and getting all that starch out, right? So as we do that, let me find my pictures here. All right, here we go. All right, let me find some of these. Okay, here, this is a good chart to start with. Okay, right here on this chart, I hope you're not on your phone, but hopefully you can see this if you are. This is a starch. This is a typical starch, right? And this is an amylopectin starch because it's branched. Amylose is straight, right? And that's an amylopectin. And so these are all glucose molecules, right? And they're all bonded together except for this one. They're all bonded together. What we have to do, see, yeast cannot eat that, right? So what we do is we add amylases from, our malted grain have endogenic, meaning that its origin is from within the grain, enzymes. So when we use these malts, they're basically breaking this molecular bond here between these glucose molecules, right? Because yeast can't eat it in that form. That's not fermentable. That's a dextrin. That's an oligosaccharide. Um, oligosaccharide. Oligo. So it means there's 3 to 12 or more branched glucose molecules all bonded together. So the amylase you can see in the green here, that's where the amylase is cleaved it. So you don't see that little red line between the green there. It's broken that glycosidic bond there, okay? So these are things the yeast can eat. So if it's a disaccharide or a monosaccharide, they can eat it no problem. So we add the malts, which have this enzyme, the alpha and the beta amylase in them, which help debranch and break up these bonds, so the yeast will have sugars, because these are basically glucose molecules, and it's just a big, long, complex starch chain. But the yeast can't eat them. They're still considered a sugar. They're just a complex sugar, right? And the yeast can't eat them in that complex form. So our ultimate goal is to break them all into monosaccharides like this. All of them are green. So if we get a perfect conversion, we break every one of those bonds, and every one of those glucose molecules are now monosaccharides because they're alone, they're unbonded. So that's why we use grain, and that's why we also use exogenous enzymes, which means like the liquid high temp that we just pour in and use. That's why we use those enzymes as well. But yeah, go back and watch last week's episode. It's very informative, and I go into great detail about how these enzymes literally come into contact with water. Right, they're in liquid, and they're in the water. They bond to the water, and as soon as they come into contact with these starches, there's a van der Waals bond that these have. Right, and it's not a real strong bond. So that bond's broken when one goes to a hydronium ion negative and a hydrogen ion positive on that water, H2, right? There's two hydrogens. It bonds to the positive and the negative, and then it comes into contact with that starch and breaks that bond, cleaves that bond between the two as they bind together, right? So it breaks that bond. It's really interesting how that works. What's going on, Scott? How's it going, brother? Yeah, it gets a little complex at this level, and this isn't stuff that you have to know to make moonshine. You know, this is 100% solely for those that want to know how. Right? I'm one of those that I always took shit apart as a kid just to see what makes it tick, and I want to know how does it. And once I learned how it works and how it does it, I just think it's a daggone amazing, man. It's amazing. Yeah, I'm really amazed at how much power that it has just to bond and snap that glycosidic bond. Now you can also break that bond by inverting the sugar like a regular table sugar, which is a little bit different because it's a disaccharide. It's a fructose and glucose, which what we were looking at before was all glucose. This one has a fructose and a sucrose, or I'm sorry, a fructose and a glucose, making it a sucrose, which is just common table sugar. But to break that bond, you have to heat it up to like 236, 237, and add some acid to it. So citric acid, lemon juice, something like that, as a catalyst to help break that bond. And then you can make, break the glycosidic bond and that sucrose and create monosaccharides of glucose and fructose, right? So pretty amazing stuff. I enjoy the science of it. Let's see if I can find another file here that'll show the different. Okay, here we go. There's amylose. This is just a long, complex starch. It's not fermentable, and that's just looping. It's not connected there. Those are just looping, like similar to a helix on the enzymes. And here you see amylopectin, which is branched. And this is a glycogen. This is what's in animals. This is what's in us. This is what the insulin breaks down to power our cells, right? To send the energy and stuff to our muscles and our cells, so our cells grow. And there's another one. Let's see. Let me take that out and add. There's one that shows cellulose. I want to show that as well because well, I thought I had a chart. Let me see. Let me make these icons extra large so I can see the damn things. Okay, yeah, here we go. This chart here, this is cellulose. And cellulose just lines up, perfectly. And this, of course, is your amylose. And this is your amylopectin. And this is glycogen. This is, say, it's an animal. Alpha glucose, 1 and 4. That tells you on the first carbon molecule and the fourth carbon molecule is where it has the bonds, and first and sixth. So you see here, glucose and beta is a 1 and 4. Amylopectin is a 1, 4, 1, 6, just like glycogen. Amazing. What's going on, Frank? How's it going, brother? Mash Brothers. That's awesome. Good to have y'all here. Yeah, it would be awesome to watch it. I guess you could probably literally watch it. You know, if you had a good microscope and you wanted to just, you know, as you take that gelatinous corn and put a little drop of watered down alpha high temp on there, I guess you could watch it cleave. That'd be pretty interesting. If you're not understanding my call, ask, because this is kind of, if you're new to this and it sounds like you are, this is going to kind of might overwhelm you a little bit. Um, we do try to keep it fairly simple in here because we do have a lot of beginners, but I just wanted to kind of introduce some of the science for people that, you know, had, you know, more inquisitive, that were wondering, you know, how exactly some of these things work. Um, but basically it's yeah, basically it's pretty amazing, you know, how it works when you break it down on a scientific level like that, and how, you know, the set, you know, let me show you. um, See how this cellulose is shaped, and check this out. Let's see which one of these. um, Let me find a little bit better one here. Let's see. Let me add another picture here. Let me try to find a cellulase. Here we go. See how this is lined up? This is a pectinase. And this is, you know, when I talk about adding pectic enzymes, and how it breaks down the cellular walls and the cellulose to allow to get the sugars out of the cells. If you notice, this linear shape really conduct itself well to contact this cellulose. See how it's linear as well. So when they come into contact, they use that water, they bond to the positive ion and the negative ion of that water, and they break that cellulose. And that cellulose wall that's in that cell, it's breaking that, literally breaking that alignment. And when it does it, it denatures, you know, this enzyme. So this part, you know, once it breaks it and does it, it's done. But you know, you've got a lot more of these as well to align with those, you know, and that's how it gets into that. That's how it really breaks down that cellulose well, and that's why we use it in our fruits and stuff, is to break that cell wall. Now I will say that anytime you're breaking down the cellulose and converting it, you're getting some wood alcohol. That's how they make wood alcohol. So you could basically take toilet paper or paper towels or wood and pulp it. And if you used enough xylanase or pectinase to convert the cellulose, break it down into the sugars, and use a yeast on it, you can make wood alcohol that way. You know, that's you know, a lot of that prison shine made with toilet paper, that's methanol, baby. You're drinking some pretty rank stuff, but yeah, you can make alcohol that way. So that's how they make a wood alcohol, methanol. Or, yeah, one of the ways. There's probably, I'm sure there's more efficient ways. I think they use when it's not going to be consumed, I think they might use acid to help catalyze and break it down, when it's going to be in something that's not going to be consumed, right? So more like for paint thinners, things like that, you know, that they might be using it for more industrial purposes where it's not going to be consumed, or to denature, you know, make it denatured. So if you drink it, not going to be good. So whenever you do use the pectic enzymes, you will get a little bit more, you know, heads and fours as a result of that. So, you know, adjust your cuts accordingly. But it's worth it. You get so much more sugars and juices out. If you've ever used it, it's amazing stuff. I'd like to watch it debranch too and at its work, because you can get the slimiest, like in peach. I wouldn't use it on my watermelon because I just try to get all the pulp out of watermelon, period. I don't want any of that in there. So I try to get out and squeeze out and get rid of all that because I think that causes off flavors. But like in like peaches or apples where you have, really meaty fruits that don't give up, like blueberries or blackberries where you have multiple tiny little berries. Once you muddle those, you've basically broken the cell. So you really don't need, pectic enzymes if you're going to use, for like your blackberries or something like that. If you just muddle them real good, or use it immersion blender, or put them in your blender, food process, or anything like that, and you chop them up real good, you're going to bust all the cells, right? Because they're pretty good size. Each one of those little, balls on a little raspberry or blackberry, uh, you know, those are the cells, and you can break those up pretty easily. But like peach, that's a perfect one to use. So you cut your peaches up, you mulch them up, and it's a slime, right? It's messy as shit. But you put those pectic enzymes in there and let it sit for 24, 36 hours, and it's amazing how it just liquefies it. And it's kind of like alpha amylase does with the gelatinized corn. Um, Probably not as quick, of course. I love watching the alpha break down the gel, the gel of the corn when you just stir it in after you just pour that teaspoon or that tablespoon in there and start blending it in. It just starts liquefaction immediately, right? That's amazing stuff. Yeah, it's good meeting y'all. The Scott Distillery at Phil Billy's Shindig. I've got some relatives that are Scots. My grandmother on my dad's side um, was a Scot and a McCoy. She was, her mom was a Scot. Her dad was a McCoy. So we have some Eastern Kentucky Scots. If you're from Eastern Kentucky, we may branch out and get related somehow on that family tree that looks like an Amylopectin. Table sugar. Okay, here we go. I use table sugar, corn syrup, and pineapples. Sounds interesting. And yeast. I would throw, get you a little yeast nutrient and throw in there, and also maybe some oyster shells to help your pH from crashing. But if you've never had any issues, sounds good, brother. It's gonna have a little fire to it. But do you use a hydrometer, or you just follow a certain recipe, the same recipe every time? Or if you have a hydrometer, it's easy to gauge how much sugars that you need. And all my viewers, hope y'all know not to click on any of these posts that people put in there, right? Don't click on those. Don't go to those. In fact, let me see here. Just a second here. Let's see. Anyway, yeah, don't click on it. Anytime somebody posts a link in here or anything like that, if it's not me or we don't acknowledge it as somebody reputable or anything like that, please don't click on them. I don't want anybody getting hacked or anything like that. What's going on, Chris? First time, you just put 10 pounds of sugar, 5 gallons of water. with my fruit and some wine yeast, letting it ferment. Awesome. Well, that should get you, 10 pounds with 5 gallons of water should get you to about a 1.080 gravity. And if you're not sure what we're talking about gravity, um, gravity is a measurement of the viscosity of your water. What it tries to do is, let me get it, well, I'll show it to you. Okay, so as you know, water has a certain viscosity, right? Thickness, basically density, I should say, not thickness. So this is called a triple scale hydrometer. And you can see it's graduated into colors here. So it's easy for you to identify approximately where you are. If you have old eyes like mine, you can say, oh, I'm about halfway down the blue. What is that? That's a 105. So anyway, when you put this in a liquid, it'll sink, right? And if it's in water, which is very thin, it'll go all the way down to about 0 here, right? Water, it's calibrated to 0. So if you ever want to calibrate your hydrometer, just put it in some water and see if it goes to 0. You're in pretty good calibration. But as the water gets thicker, it's more buoyant, kind of like salt water, right? Because it's got extra, things in there other than just water. So as we add sugar, it's going to get thicker and more buoyant. So it's going to make this more buoyant. And this basically measures the amount of sugar based on buoyancy or the density or the viscosity of the water. So when you get to the yellow here, that's kind of a caution line. So that's telling you you're getting pretty close to, yes, and that's a mosquito right on my finger. Man, gun it. Oh, I can't believe I got that. So 1080 is right in the middle of the yellow. So that's probably about where you started. You don't really want to get beyond the yellow here. You start getting pretty hot, right? It starts getting really spicy. So this is called a triple scale hydrometer. And grab one of these. Actually, grab 2. If you buy one, you'll break it in a heartbeat. If you have 2, some bitch will last forever, and you'll have that second one for nothing. But if you buy the one, man, it'll break the day you get it. But it's still wet from when I used it. So that's the triple scale, and this, you can use this as well to help you make recipes. So you can say, okay, I'm going to make me some peach wine, and I've got 20 pounds of peaches, and I want to make about 10 gallons. So I'm going to put this 20 pounds of peaches and 10 gallons of water. How much sugar will I need, right? So after you use your pectic enzymes and you get you get it thinned out, or you can just strain some water and you put it in a, I use a graduated cylinder. You can put it in a big jar or whatever. And then you can put this in there and it'll say 1030 or 1040 for your peach juice. You say, okay, I need to get a little sweeter. Maybe I'd like to get to 1060, 70, to make a pretty decent, or 80. 80 is a fine number to get decent production. So you need to add enough sugar, and you want to melt your sugar down in the water. So you take some of those juices, you heat them up, add your sugar to it, dump it back in there, stir it up real well, and then take some liquid out, put it in your graduated cylinder, and float it again. No, I need a little bit more. It's still in the blue. So I take it out, heat up some, more, add some, sugar to it, dissolve it in good, pour it in there. Okay, now we're perfect. We're at 1070 or 1080. So we know that we got enough sugar in here to get a pretty decent amount of production and a pretty decent, high alcohol wine. Now, if you rotate this, the reason called triple scale, it'll also tell you that's about 10% ABV potential. So if you go 1080, actually just a little bit under 1080, that's 10% potential ABV, or or 20 proof basically. So that's 10% alcohol potential. Now, if all these fermentables that you're measuring are able to be fermented, right? So this doesn't, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said it that way. All those sugars that you're measuring, some of them might not be fermentable, right? When we were looking at this, sometimes sometimes these don't get fully debranched, right? So you got like 1, 2, 3, 4. The yeast can't eat that. That's a dextrin, right? Yeast's not going to be able to eat that. So that's a sugar in there that's not going to get eaten by the yeast right here, right in the branch. See, that's another one that's got 4. That yeast can't eat that. And see, you can see this shape, this amylopectin here. When it falls into this amylase, you see how this mess, see those circular things, those catch a lot of these long chains. All these twists and turns, all it has to do is make contact. And when it makes contact, it breaks, it severs, it cleaves at that contact point. Then it kind of denatures that spot of the protein amylase, but it still has all this other to contact other spots, right? Now the alpha amylase is an endoamylase. It starts kind of in the middle and debranches out, whereas your glucoamylase and your beta amylase are endoenzymes that chop from the outside. So they'll break from the outside. So you got, you know, gluco added, and glucose is probably one of the best. It's better than beta at completing the outside debranching of all these mono, di, and oligosaccharides, right? So definitely gets you a hydrometer. Now let me show you another type of hydrometer so you don't get confused and get the wrong one. Well, actually you need both anyway. But this is a proofing hydrometer. And it works on the same principle that the other one works on. We know that basically when we distill alcohol, we're getting alcohol, we're getting water, and we're getting some other congeners, some other, byproducts along with it. But essentially, our goal is to extract the alcohol and the ethanol and water, right? This knows a perfect 100% ethanol, which is 200 proof, right? Will sink all the way to here because it's very, very thin, right? And this will drop down to right there at 100%. 100% is 200 proof. I don't know if y'all can read that on there or not. It's probably this lens not got the best macro focus, but you can see 100 on there and 200 on the back. So it's 200 proof, 100%. So as you get more water, this becomes more and more buoyant, right? Because the alcohol is thinner than water. So as you start adding, but that's azeotrope, so they do combine. You don't get, like oil and water. It doesn't separate like that, unfortunately, because they're azeotropic. They bond quite readily together. But as you add more water, your proof goes down because your water content is increasing. So this will measure how much water and how much alcohol you have, and it will give you a proof reading. So this is called a proofing hydrometer or an alkalometer. But it's two essential tools. Now, old timers, they didn't use those. They didn't have Amazon. They didn't, I mean, they're cheap on Amazon. It's like $6, $8 each, probably get a pair for 12. And some places sell, both of those as a set, so that's always nice too, to get, the set, because it helps a lot in proofing your alcohol. I can pretty much drink anything off the still and taste it and sip it, and I'm pretty good at telling you, how many proof it is. We're reading the bead. You know, and that's what the old timers had to do, is just taste it or read the bead. Let me make sure I'm not missing some questions. Awesome, brother. Doing good, Roy. How you doing, brother? Wish you could have made it to Maggie, but I understand. I'm not going down Thursday. You know, I'm not. I hate being that way, but man, that's $200 more. You know, for another night, and a room for another night, man. That's 200 a night. You go down Thursday, say Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. After taxes and everything, it's like $700. You know, and all the cleaning fees and all the other fees the hotels charge you, man. It's close to $700. So I can cut a couple hundred off that by skipping a night, and who knows, Saturday night after I get done partying, I might just let my designated driver drive us home. So I'm trying to save money, man. Last year I went down and spent almost $1,000 after all the food and drink and gas and the hotel and everything. It's like, damn, man. I mean, I enjoy the festivals and seeing everybody, but they you know got to get the rooms cheaper. So we're probably we're going to go to Waynesville and get a room there, for $80 versus 200, 10-minute drive. No brainer. I guess if you don't have a designated driver, though, it's not going to be easy. But I end up drinking more, so we're good. Let me make sure I got. Yeah, it's great. It turns that mass into just liquid, just like the alpha does the gelatinized corn. It's amazing to watch. But yeah, you'll have a 1080, so you'll have a pretty good one. If you go to the feed supply store, you'll see a 50-pound bag. I don't know if you do any gardening or not, but I say 50-pound bag because they've got smaller bags, and they're like $7 for a 10-pound bag. Or you can get a 50-pound bag for 14 or 15. For twice the price, you can get 50 pounds as opposed to 10, right? And it's crazy. So I always just get 50. I mean, it's basically crushed oyster shells and coral. It's calcium carbonate. It it has a shelf life of forever. I mean, it's this stuff that was, so I boil it to make sure that they say it's clean and pure. I boil it anyway just to make sure, because I don't want any saltwater critters or any odors or any bacteria from any of that getting into it. So I'll put it in some boiling water and let that, clean it. And then I'll lay it out drain it, and then lay it out on a towel, let it air dry, and then bag it up. But anyway, if you get you some cheesecloth and put you a couple handfuls, I don't know how much you're fermenting. The more you ferment, the more handfuls you need, of course. Put them inside that cheesecloth and tie it up in a little bag and just throw it in at the very beginning. It's like if you've got a pH of 3.2 and you're worried about it getting lower, and you're halfway through the fermentation, you got a long way to go, and it's going to stall, right? We know. It's too late to add the shells at that point in time, because this is a buffer, not a booster, right? So if you throw them in the beginning as a preventative measure, they work perfectly fine. But if you need to boost pH and you didn't add them and you've got a stuck fermentation, I would recommend using pickling lime, which is calcium hydroxide. The hydroxide does oxygenate a bit, and it will cause the yeast to kind of go into breeding, like we were talking about earlier. Where you stir the shit out of it, making that yeast starter. Kind of puts them into, gets them in the mood. I guess you get that oxygen, man. They want to start breeding. I don't know. Maybe it's the yeast effect, equivalent to a Spanish fly or something for yeast. But they get that oxygenation, man. They forget about everything. They just start breeding again. But so it'll do that, and it might stress them a little bit because of the breeding cycle. But it's much better than the stress that they're going to put off from getting fried and low acid. So. Most of you, if you're towards the end of your fermentation and you're at 3.5, don't freak out. The yeast is selectively bred to handle pHs in the mid threes all the way up into the 6 pluses. But it's best to keep your fermentations acidic for several reasons. It helps conversion. So if you get your pH a little lower when you're actually doing your conversions, that does help. And it also helps keep the environment acidic, and it discourages bacterial growth. So a lot of bacteria, they don't like, a kind of a acidic environment. So they don't want to grow as much, and keeping it cooler. So it depends on your yeast, of course, what temperature they prefer. But if you're like using a wine yeast, if you can keep it in the low to mid 80s and into the 70s, even for a lot of these wine yeast, like for your brandies, and if you're making wine, a slower fermentation like that is preferred. It does take longer. It can take months, but I mean, basically, that's what you're doing with wine. You're doing a primary fermentation, and then you rack all your wine off into a secondary fermentation vessel. Same with brandies. I do this with brandies. Some people don't. They just go ahead and distill before they do a secondary fermentation. I like doing the secondary fermentation um, to get more fermenting done. Makes it a little drier. And also, there's a lot of chemical processes that are going on that give you some flavors that you won't get if you just immediately distill right after it gets to 1.000 or 1.005. Well, close enough to it. But I will say, if you let it get really dry, you can taste that dryness sometimes in your distillate. So, not saying that's a bad thing, but if it's something that you're not shooting for or that you don't want, probably a good idea to go ahead and ferment when it is at 0 and not let it get real dry, because that dryness can carry over. So, back to the eggshells. I do get off on tangents. So if you throw those eggshells in about the same time you do your yeast, basically what happens is the fermentation processes creates lots of organic acids, right? We've been over the different acids that are created. And as it creates these acids, the pH drops. When you do a high sugar content, it accelerates. Everything's accelerated. Fermentation time's accelerated. Acid production is accelerated. Everything speeds up. So you tend to get more acid buildup in higher sugar and fast fermentations. Not necessarily fast, I shouldn't say, because a lot of these fermentations with grains go pretty quickly in 4 days, and they don't build up the acids like a heavy sugar. So it has to do with the amount of sugar that's being used and the way it's fermenting. But acids, you get more acid buildup in like the tequilas, rums, sugar shines, anything where you have a higher sugar content, you're going to get more organic production or organic acid production. So as these organic acids are produced, and the whole mash or must or whatever you wash got going on come in contact with this calcium carbonate, it helps neutralize it, right? So it's not going to raise pH real quick, but it'll prevent it from getting real low real fast, right? So very instrumental in using. A lot of commercial distillers do it. They use them. Some use the stable 5.2 that you can buy in a jar and overpay for. It's basically calcium carbonate, overpriced, powderized um, oyster shells and coral parts. So if you can, just get those oyster shells and clean them up real good. Plus, they're great for putting in your soil for your tomato plants and your pepper plants. If you ever start getting black spots on there on your tomatoes and peppers, it's because of calcium deficiency. So throw that in your soil, mix it at the beginning, and as you get halfway through growth season, add that to your water and water it, and it'll sit on the top and slowly dissolve, and as you water it and as it rains on it, and it's really good for your plants too. So, and if you have chickens, you already know. Do you have a pectic enzyme I prefer to use? I just use LD Carlson makes some pretty good products. I get on Amazon and I buy a lot from them. Um, so I use pretty much their stuff. I'd say they're all pretty effective. But I like using their products. They have some pretty good products. I get their yeast nutrients. I get my yeast nutrients from them as well. And I try to buy everything on Amazon. It gets here quickly and cheap, and about the cheapest. If you got a mom and pop, here we go. Yeah, yeah. I didn't even see that. Yeah, so there we go. You got it. Oh no! Did you have just one? Because they don't break. If you have two, some bitches will never break. They'll last forever. And you'll be like, why did I buy two? I should have wasted my money on that some bitch. But if you buy one, it'll break tomorrow. That's just the way it's always worked. Seems like Murphy's Law, right? So yeah, you're good to go, brother. That LD Carlson makes a good diammonium phosphate, Fermax. You want to try to get the Fermax or the Fermade. Um, I think there's a Fermax O that's organic that a lot of people really like. But all of them should be good. And you want to use those like in my call where you're doing a wash, like a high sugar wash where there's not a lot of nutrients, or in a lot of your fruit brandies. A lot of people say, well, there's fruit in there. That's a nutrient. Just because we eat it doesn't mean yeast can, right? And that it'll give them the nutrients. Yeast need what's called yan and fan, and that's yeast assimilable nitrogen, which is the yan, and free amino nitrogen, which is the fan. So basically NH4 ammonium, which we use in gardening. So a lot of this is just like gardening. I mean, the yeast, you're feeding them and keeping the pH just like gardening and like in our bodies. So the more you learn about biology, the more all this kind of interacts and makes sense, right? Um, but yeah, a good yeast nutrient for most, unless you're using grains, like even with just a straight corn, it wouldn't hurt to have just a touch of extra nutrients in there. Now, anytime that you use any malts or most of your other grains, barleys, wheats, you won't need any. Those have naturally have plenty of yan and fan in them. I've heard a lot of people talk about tomato paste. Tomato paste does not have the yan and fan that you need. So any of these recipes that you say that says use tomato paste as a nutrient, you're not getting the full nutrient. Now, I will say that there are a lot of essential nutrients in tomato paste, and that will help the yeast. Very beneficial. There's a whole host of things in there that. So if you want to supplement the diammonium phosphate or the Fermax or Fermate or Fermo or I don't know who knows, um, then you can with a little bit of that. If you're making a wine and brandy, I wouldn't recommend it because I don't think that's going to be very tasty in your wine, right? So, but people do it, and a long time, because I did the research and it doesn't have yan and fan, so I'm like, nope, don't use it. It's terrible. It's not helping, and I was wrong when I said that it's not helping. It does help. It's just not feeding the yeast, but it does, gives it calcium. There's a whole host of nutrients in there. I've had them written down and remembered them and forgot them about 5 times, but biottins, there's a lot of different things in there that nutrient wise that will help your fermentation. It's just that it doesn't have the yan and fan that you need that you do get from a Fermax or a Fermate or a Fermo. Or a lot of people like the Fermo. A lot of people have the misconception also about urea that's used in some of the diammonium phosphates, and it's not something that's going to hurt you. It's actually a beneficial thing, and you've got it in your body, and you eat that. You're getting it from other things. People say, "Oh, it's gross," but also so is using manure on your garden. But you don't think about eating shit when you eat that tomato, do you? So some people are kind of funny about little things while I'm drinking a toxin that's eating my liver up. I'm going to worry about urea. I don't know. Learn more about the science. All I can say, it's not all that bad, and a lot of them don't have much in it, if any. And you can get the urea. I think the Fermo doesn't have it. Copperhead Road, Mash Bros. I love that song. That was actually the first CD I ever had when I got my first CD player for my car. That was the first Steve Earle, the first CD I bought. Man, I love that fucking song. Good to have you with us, boys. Right? Exactly. So that is exactly, Clint. So a lot of times when you use molasses, see, molasses is kind of like this right here. Has a lot of fermentables, but this trisaccharide, it might be fermentable, but it's going to take a long time. The yeast will stress eating that. This disaccharide, it'll eat it up. That'll eat that disaccharide. Those two actually got chopped randomly by the alpha. It'll eat those. It'll eat that one. But these strains of 3 and 4, the 4s it won't eat, the 3s it has trouble eating. And a lot of times your stuck fermentations come from these unfermentable sugars. So you drop your hydrometer in there and you're saying, well, it's reading 1.020, but I can't get nothing to happen. My pH is fine. The temperature's fine. The yeast are good. What the fuck? And that's exactly what's happening is you've got sugars in there that aren't fermentable. Can you do anything about it? Yes. You can throw some liquid glucoamylase in there and it will break those up. So if it's 4 or less, it'll break that into 2 easily because, right, we talked about how the glucoamylase is an exo enzyme. It works from the out, and alpha is the endo. It works from the in. So gluco and beta, they work on the outsides, right? It chops it on the outside, whereas the alpha works on the inside and debranching. I've got a peach brandy 20. All right, let me pull up my chart here too to help. Now this is just a chart it's not set in stone. So let me take this out of here so it's hard for people to read. But on this chart, and this is in the file section in the militia and in the DIY shining stuff page. So if you go to the file section, you can find this chart. And I don't have it labeled correctly here, but I labeled it probably fruit per pound or something like that, so you could know it by the name. But here it shows apricots and peaches and apples and all kinds of. It's even got some. This looks a little bit out of focus for me. I'm not sure if y'all can see this. Okay, I do have another chart. Let me see. Can y'all see that okay? What's going on, Chris? Anyway, let me find peaches on here. So here's peaches. 3 to 6 pounds per gallon should get you around a 1080 to 1090. I found that probably to be a little lacking depending on your peaches. Now, if your peaches are hard as a fucking rock and they don't have much red on them, they're yellow and they're hard, you're going to have to do 6+ pounds to get the sugars because they're not real sweet yet, right? So basically, when we say they're not real sweet yet, it means a lot of the sugars are still bound and they haven't been broken down, and that's fructose. So that's a little different than the starches from sugars. So fructose is a little bit different, and pectin pectic enzymes will break those down. Not pectin. A lot of people talk about pectin. They confuse pectin with pectic enzymes, and pectin is a thickening agent used in making jams and jellies. So don't get them confused because the pectic enzyme's the opposite. You know, it's trying to get rid of a lot of that thickening stuff, and pectin's just going to make it thick. So let me see. So 25 pounds of peaches, 11 pounds of sugar. And that's stuck at 1.1 and won't ferment down to 1.0. I cook the peaches and let them sit for 24 hours with pectic enzyme and added yeast nutrient. Well, it's kind of out of order. Best thing to do when you first process your fruit is to go ahead and if you're following a recipe where it's pretty tight and pretty accurate with how much sugar you can expect and the gravity that you can expect, it's best to go ahead and add most of that water and your fruit and bring it up to about 160 degrees. You don't have to boil it. You don't have to do 160 degrees for 15-20 minutes, basically killing wild yeast, killing bacteria. We don't want bird shit, that's going to be bad for fermentation, right? So we want to kill any bacteria and wild yeast and things like that off, so we don't get any surprises. Wild yeast can surprise you with some really bad flavors, and bacteria can surprise you with, a pukey smelling fermentation, or worse, funguses and molds and other issues that you can kind of kill off. I will say fruit that you're going to secondary ferment over time, I would recommend an airlock. But like if it's just going to be a quick brandy or something like that you're not going to do secondary fermentation, or you're doing a grain or just a sugar wash that's going to be done within 4, 5, 6 days, you just throw a towel over it and then just set, like if you're using a bucket, put a towel over it and just set the lid there. Don't push the lid down and tighten it up or anything like that. Just let the lid sit there. That'll keep bugs from getting in there, and it helps keep air out while it creates carbon dioxide through the fermentation process and fills the chamber and forces air out, right? That's what we want, because that buildup of carbon dioxide also helps keep the bacterial growth down, because bacteria, as we know, needs oxygen, to help reproduce and grow. So if we can keep that out there and keep it slightly acidic and keep the temperatures right, we can keep the bacterial growth down, keep it at bay. So, but yeah, go ahead and cook your peaches and put your sugar in there and let it, dissolve in good. And then once it cools, because if you notice, these come with a chart, and I think when you test with this triple scale, it's pretty much zeroed in on the liquid having a temperature of maybe 60 degrees Fahrenheit, 60 to 70 range. But there is a conversion chart that comes with it. If you want to go ahead and measure it while it's 120 or whatever, you can use that chart and make the adjustments necessary to see what your gravity is, right? So definitely handy and something that you need. And but when it gets down to 1.1 and 1.0, basically, sometimes a lot of fruit will have unfermentables, and it's just basically if you had some glucoamylase that you wanted to add, it would help further break down some of those bonded sugars, But generally with fruit, you're going to have pectin, amylopectin. But I will say, a lot of people don't realize it, but all the stuff that we're doing has both of these in it. So it's not just one or the other. It has both. So most of your fruit, all your fruits and vegetables and everything is going to have both of these in it in different percentages and ratios, right? So, and mostly this too. Actually all of it, but we're not going to use insulin to break down glycogens and stuff like that. So yeah, I'd say you're fine as a wine. It means it's going to be a little bit sweet. Trying to see, I'm not sure what your starting gravity was. Reading back. So if you started at a 1080 and you're down to 1.1, that means you got 7. So you can basically just take it as if you started at a 1070. And so you're going to have like 9 and change. you know, 1070. Yeah, it's gonna be 9. So not a biggie. You might suffer just a tiny bit loss of production, but you may find that it's going to be a little smoother too. So a lot of times when you get to that 1060 range, 1070 range, that's not a failure. You know, that's most of your commercial bourbon and whiskey makers. They have everything down to a science. They ferment in 3 to 4 days, right? And once it gets down to 100, they'll start with a 1060. They get to 0, they'll do that 8% all day long, and they'll because time's money, and it makes a smoother product too. So there's a trade-off there. Most moonshiners tend to get a little greedy and push that up to 108, 090, and try to add more sugar and get it hotter. It does increase production, but it's going to be a little bit hotter at the same time. So it's not a failure. You can definitely run it pretty much as is, and you should be fine. There's no use in letting it get to 0. You just have unfermentables. If you got some liquid glucose, you could probably throw that in there, and it might break the rest of those down. But you should be fine. I'd just go ahead and ferment it at 1.1 and let it go. And again, if you were using molasses or brown sugar, there's your reason, because that molasses has you can't break it all down. It's got some complex starches in there that unless you use the exact right amylase, it's not going to break it down. Let's see here. Button. All right, here's a glucanase. A lot of times when we do wheats and rye, we get those glucans, the gumminess. It's kind of like, how the corn gets gelatinized, that gel. Well, if you do a high rye or a high wheat or oats, you get a pretty high buildup. And this is the glucanase, and it helps break up those glucans. That sticky stuff that you're seeing is called glucans, and it has, you can tell here that it's going to work at breaking down cells real well there. Long chains get caught up in that helix, but also these folds, I think they're called sheets. They're folded back into a sheet. But it catches a lot of in those breaks too. So all these helixes and stuff will grab branches off those pectins, right, and start breaking them down. So anywhere it comes into contact, it'll debranch it. Now your brown sugar is going to have your molasses in there. Your molasses is going to have unfermentable sugars. So anytime you're doing the rums and stuff, there is I think it's invertase that some rum. If you buy rum specific yeast, a lot of times if you look at the instructions or the contents, they'll have some invertase in there. That invertase, I don't know if I have a picture of invertase or not. No, it's a lot like a xylanase, I guess. You can see here where it's going to work on this we were talking about earlier, how it works on cellulose. These line up to the linears, those rows, and then it's also breaks other things down. But an invertase is also one of these enzymes that will help break down those. So some of your rum yeast will have invertase to help ferment a little better, but it's not a big deal. And having that little bit of sweetness a lot of time carries over in the distillation to some pretty good sweet tasting rum. So it's not a loss. And it's not gonna run anything. All right, let's see, where are we? Yeah. Yeah, you've got just unfermentable sugars from the brown sugar or the molasses they use in the rum. So don't worry about it. When it gets down to 1.1, it's been a week. You're as far as it's going to go, unless you want to try to go the expense of adding some everything. But I just go ahead and ferment it with that sweetness in there, or I distill it with that sweetness in there, and it should carry over and be some pretty good stuff. Because most of your rums do that for that reason. And pH of 4 at the end, perfect, perfect. That's perfectly fine. Yeah, now I agree. Dark, if it was like in the middle of fermentation, you know, it might, but it's best to add them at the beginning. But 4.0 at the end, it isn't bad at all. It's definitely, like I was talking about earlier, 3.5, don't spaz, because we know these organic acids are going to be created during the fermentation process. So at the end of it, you can expect it to be kind of low. And with a lot of wines and stuff, I use an acid blend, to help get it low, because you want that tartness from being a pretty acidic wine. That's what gives wine that tartness. So if you want that tart and that dry, you need to keep your acid level on the low side. So that's a little bit different in the wine making. So we use what's called an acid blend. It's got like citric acid, malic acid. Probably there's some. I don't think it's got propionic acid. I'm not sure the difference. I know it's got malic and citric. May have some other common acid in it that I'm not thinking of. But anyway, those are used a lot in winemaking. And when I do like a grain, I'll throw some of that acid blend in there to bring my water down to 5.2 before I start doing conversions, because I want that 5.2, 5.3 pH when I start boiling the water before I put the corn in it, right? Because I want it that low pH to help break those bonds, right? Because we talked about earlier, inverting sugar with temperature, and that acid is a catalyst. It's also a catalyst in your conversions. So, little secret: make sure your pH is down there before you start doing your conversions, instead of waiting to check your pH at that yeast pitching and then try to make some adjustments then, which is not too late, but it's beneficial to go ahead and add it and get your water at that 5.3 when you do the conversions, because it will help in your conversions. So when you hear Wayne say, I get a 1070, 1075 on a lot of my conversions, that's an awesome conversion rate, right? And so he's getting this. He's getting all those molecules converted, or next to all of them converted. You might have a few disaccharides still on there, but you're still getting everything that's fermentable. So, it's definitely what you want. So when you get those conversions into those numbers, you're doing something right for sure. That's really excellent conversion rate. So that's what you shoot for. And keeping that low pH water will help that conversion. A lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't do it. They wait till it's yeast time to check pH and add it. And again, it's not too late, but if you can remember, I mean, there's so many things, and that's why you need to make a little list. And I talked about it last week. When I get time, I'm not going to have time to this weekend for sure, because I'm going to probably be in Maggie Valley Friday and Saturday. So I guess we're going to do a shit show from there on Friday. There definitely won't be a Q&A Saturday, because I'm going to be drinking. I'm definitely not doing a Q&A drinking, because I'm not going to slur my way through it. So we'll be sampling lots and lots of liquors and lots of sweetened up liquors that give me hangovers for 3 days. And so I might have to cut back on a lot of the post. A lot of people like the post stuff and drinking all that sweet stuff. And it's hard on the pancreas and it's hard on the liver. All the sweet it leads for a pretty rough hangover. And some of it's pretty headsy too. So sometimes the best cuts aren't made. Yeah, EC 1118 is an excellent yeast for stuck fermentations. Actually, that's one of its best purposes. It's probably all around. If you were to buy one yeast, EC 1118 hands down is your choice of yeast. If you're going to just buy one and you're not going to experiment with yeast, make it EC 1118 because it's the best overall yeast you can get, but it's the best at nothing, right? So it's not the best brandy yeast, not the best wine yeast, not the best grain yeast, not the best rum yeast, not the best vodka yeast, but it's the best if you just want to buy one to do it all. So it's like second and third place in a lot of those categories where there's always a yeast or two, Quebec or something that's going to be better. But if you just buy one, make it EC 1118 because it's really good. It'll finish dry, has a really good alcohol tolerance, good pH tolerance. It's great for beginners and it's great for unsticking fermentations. Gosh, it's going to get worse than Sturgis back in the day. I know, brother. Man, they gouge you. You know, next weekend you can go to Maggie Valley and you can get a rent for 60. It's the same place you can get a rent for $60, $70. This weekend too, 200, 220. You know, this is crazy. So I drive, 15, 20 minutes to Waynesville and get a room there for 60, $70 if I don't car camp. I may just sleep in the fucking car because usually it's me and a few of the hardcore drinkers. Wes is always there. Me and Wes and a few others, and we're just sitting around at 4 in the morning. All right, I guess it's time to get a little shut eye. So we'll go lay down from 4 to 10 in the morning. So for 6 hours sleep, pay $200 for a hotel room, sleep for 6 hours. We're up and back at it again at 10 the next morning when it opens. So yeah, not happening. I will say though, if you get like a cabin, like a 3-bedroom cabin, and you get 3 couples to go in on it, that's $300 a night. $100 a night for a nice cabin. Hell yeah, all day long. But $200 for a cheap ass motel, nah. Motel hell. Which comfort's not that bad. A lot of people, that's where most people say they're comfort, and it's not that bad. It's not that great either. It's not $200. Hell, I can get a 4-star hotel for $200. I can go get a damn VRBO on the damn beach for $220 and $250. What they're charging, off season. Thirsty, I need something. Nobody calling shot. Hope that ain't too long. Good stuff. I need to trim my damn mustache on. Yeah, they're bad, brother. Yeah, the yeast in wine yeast and most of your yeast handle into the mid 3s, no problem. They don't really stress. You start getting to the lower 3s and upper 2s, they're going to start stressing. So, but expect it. It's expected for it to get into the low 4s and high 3s. Actually, that's where you want a lot of your wines and brandies to be. Yeah, shells are great. They're buffered. They don't raise it. They just buffer. Yeah, we appreciate Clinton here because a lot of times I'm answering somebody's question and he'll help me by answering them, a little bit ahead of time so I can stay caught up because I get a little bit behind if I don't. And Clint helps out and he knows what he's talking about. Clint's very, very knowledgeable. Been commercial distilling, a dozen years now, commercial. So Clint knows what he's talking about. Which is why I'm bringing him into DIY to help me moderate and answer questions in there and stuff because I'm admin in like 5 different groups and and it's hard for me to do all that and do my regular life stuff and get together classwork for on here and get pictures and videos and other things together and notes and things that I do for the classwork for this. So it certainly helps out a lot to have Clint and in there helping. I think Wayne every once in a while I'll jump in here to help, and there's a few others, and it's much appreciated. Now, if they answer wrong, I'm gonna get on them. But so far, they know. Um, yeah, in sour mash, I do recommend using the shells because it helps regulate if you overuse the back set. The biggest issue most people have in sour mashing is they put in high proof back set, which kills the yeast off and basically sterilizes and kills everything off, and then you have to add more yeast and after you add your water and sugar right and you lower the proof down enough by doing that. But when you add that back set on there, it kills it off. Or adding hot back set in there kills everything off and denatures and kills the yeast. Or adding too much and dropping the pH down to too low, stressing and killing the yeast. So that's three of the biggest problems most people do in sour mashing. I'd say the most common is not running their back set down into the tails far enough and going in with like an 80 proof back set, killing everything. A lot of people cut it off at 80%, or I'm sorry, 80 proof, and there's that's a lot of liquor. 80 proof is basically what you're buying in a lot of the jars that you drink. So, but that's a lot of times that's when your tails start coming in on your run. So if you just keep a separate, bucket or jars marked tails, keep them separate, but run it on out. All that alcohol is easily recovered, and it's good ethanol that's easily recovered from the oils and everything else in those tails, so that are easily separated on a second, the next run, or in your thumper, or wherever you want to do it. Throw it on the next. Don't throw it on your mash. You throw it in the in your pot before you distill when you add your mash. So don't add it to your mash. That high alcohol will kill a lot of your yeast, and if not all your yeast. But those are the three most common things that people make a mistake in on their sour mashes, and having those shells in there certainly helps. But baking soda, a lot of people ask the question, baking soda, if you don't have pickle and lime and you didn't add the shells and the pH is getting into the twos, it's better to go ahead and just use baking soda, even though the sodium hurts the yeast and all the hot, the bicarbonate, of course, makes it bubble up, a lot of oxygen created, and of course makes them breed a little bit again. But that's still better than stressing them from high acidic content. So definitely, probably a last resort. But if that's all you got, and that's what most people have, it's the lesser of the two evils. So go ahead and use it. But be prepared, because it's like a volcano and it's very short lived. So it'll adjust it, but not for very long. So it's best to, if you can, to buffer those shells and just put them in everything. Just make it a habit of put them in everything when you're done. Throw them in a pot, rinse them, boil them, kill any bacteria that might be on them, let them dry, ready to go on the next one. And if you have sour mash, just leave them in there. Yeah, those things work though. How's it going, Chris? You on the road yet, brother? What's going on, Tony? Tony's been working on a boat. I figured Chris be on the road already. You're welcome, brother. Anytime, man. Exactly. Yeah, yeah, and even if you can do it fast, like a sugar wash, I've seen some, you know, sugar washes go pretty quickly, but man, they're hot. And you get a lot of production. And I will say that if you're like making a vodka and you're going to run it over, 6 plates and scrub the shit out of it, why not? Get high production. You'll take it to that 190 that it takes to make it a true vodka, which is required. You have to have a 190 proof or plus to make it a true vodka. It's one of the TTB rules, I guess. But if you're gonna get a neutral spirit like that, it'd probably be okay. So a lot of people do, you know, corn high temp, because we've done the math and we figured out that as long as you're getting a decent deal on corn and you're using yellow dent corn, you can get your sugars out of corn cheaper than you can buy bags of sugar, and it makes a more mellow, tastier product. So corn conversion is definitely the way to go to get even a high. Of course, what happens is you can only go so high because the corn gets so thick. If you get beyond like 2.5, 3 pounds, it gets really thick and hard to manage. Um, so if you want to get that extra, I recommend dextrose or invert sugar. Dextrose is right here. That's basically a dextrose, all single glucose molecules. That's what dextrose is, and you used to love that shit. And this is basically dextrose. And once you mix it in a bag, of course, it's no longer branched. There's no bonds holding it in that shape anymore, so it just falls out right. But yeah, that's what dextrose is, and it's a little more expensive, but it's a great thing to use. Like if in your grains, if you don't get a real good conversion, you're getting a 1050 or something like that, and you'd like a little bit more, you want to bump it up to 6070. Either using a corn syrup or that dextrose um, is a good way to go. Yeah, Clint's. I think Clint's been commercial distilling now for about 10, 12 years. So yeah, he knows. Yes, sir. You can absolutely. Brother, you're not far from me. You're about 25 minutes down the road from me, brother. I'm close. There's some pretty good distilleries there in Frankfurt. If you want to stop by one of them in the morning, because you're about 4.5, 5 hours away at a motorhome. I'd say about 5 hours from Maggie. So if you wake up in the morning and you want to do a little visit, there's some pretty interesting distilleries close by there, bro. Some good ones. 40 years. Right. How long you been commercial distilling? Yeah, he's been at it since he was a kid too, like me. But he's been commercial for 10, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 10, 12 years. Um, yes, yes, and actually, a lot of winemakers, there's a powder that you buy, and it looks like sawdust, but it's not. It's tannins, and basically what they do is they soak the wood in this water. They, like basically a barrel wood, if you will, or and they soak it in water and they leach all these tannins out, and it gets like an amber color, right? And then they dehydrate it. So what's left over is a powder, and it's not sawdust. It's not wood dust. It's not cellulose. It's tannins that have been leached from that wood. And yeah, you add those to wines to give it that bitterness, along with the acid and the tannins, give it that bitter flavor, along with the dryness. Yeah. If that's the type of wine you like, I use I use chestnut tannins in my wines. Yeah, it's a good one. Learning to do just the old school sour mashing too. Uncle Jesse's is a great method. It's great, but I like to supplement a certain percentage of grains every time. So hypothetically, take out 5 pounds of corn, whatever's floating on the top for sure that's spent, but take out about 5 pounds, and then cook your 5 pounds up and throw it in there, and to keep that flavor profile up. It's not as much converting. It's none of that's happening. You're basically doing a sugar shine with grain flavorings and backset to keep it soured, and that's basically what the US that's doing. So if if you do the USJGM, eventually your grains don't contribute anything, so it ends up being just a sugar wash, right? Because you're just adding sugar and backset, and you're really not getting a lot of that grain flavor anymore. So if every generation you take out a little grain, or every other generation you take out some grain and supplement it with fresh grain, you can just continue that sour meshing method for years. I know people that's done it literally for years, and that way it doesn't start to peter out on you, doesn't get weak, and the grain flavors get real thin and weak. Yep. Yeah, it definitely added a cheap, easy way to do a sour mash, a simplified way to do a sour mash, for sure. But the sour mashing process, man, they've been doing that for a long, long time, and it's not that much more complicated than Uncle Jesse's. But you put it in simple terms for easy to read, easy to follow, easy to do, and if you follow the instructions, it'll do well. But when you start getting into the fifth, seventh, eighth generation, if you don't start supplementing grains at one point, you're just basically doing a sugar shine. And thin mash, basically the same thing, but the backset gives it that sour flavor, and your backset's really acidic, so it helps give it that bitter sour flavor as well. Good stuff. I like sour mash. Matter of fact, what I'm drinking there's a weeded Bloody Butcher sour mash. I didn't like it so much when I was younger, but as I've gotten older, I like it better and better. How much on Phil Billy's? Now it's Phil Billy. Now it's my brother, Phil Billy, uh, brother by another mother, Phil Billy. I'd say that's the still he makes, and I'd say it's close to. I'm not going to quote a price for him, but I'd say it's close to $3,000. Those for that size steel, and that all the attachments, and the thumper with the infuser and the worm, all copper and everything like that. I'd say it's probably close to $3,000. They're not cheap, but you don't have to start with that. Fortunately, you can start with basically a keg, 15-gallon keg steel, or a 18.5-gallon bever with a football type bever, and it makes them pretty decent. You can put some copper mesh to make sure that you're getting the pure copper mesh, and not copper plated steel, because that is trash and it'll ruin your distillate. So you can always check it with a magnet to see. Um, and if it is metal, let everybody know which one on Amazon. But there's some on Amazon that's metal, and I think those are more designed for um, furnishing, clean, like they use brass for um, cleaning paint off furniture and stuff like that. I'm not sure what all the different uses of it are, but I think some of that steel plated stuff is kind of like a steel wool with a copper. But the copper mesh, the true copper mesh, the pure copper mesh it's really good. You can put it in the sight glass if you've got one, or you can loosely fit it inside your tube going up, your column tube going up, spool, whatever, stainless steel coming up out of your keg, and those vapors go through there. And what happens is you get sulfites in your distillate, another natural process. Sometimes, like grapes, prunes, plums, things of that nature, figs, tend to produce a little more sulfites. Grapes, dark grapes, produce a little more sulfites than, say, like a grain mash will, right? But they all do, sometimes more than others. And sometimes it can give it a little off flavor. The sulfur can give it a little off flavor. So you get that rotten egg smell. Means you had a pretty high sulfite um, creation during your fermentation, and you can put the copper mesh in the vapor path, and as those vapors blow through that mesh, you get really good contact. So there's a lot of surface area coming in contact with that vapor, and all those sulfites will readily bond with that copper. They jump out of the vapor. They're not really bonded well with the alcohol and the water, but they bond really well with copper. So they'll stick to that copper like kind of like glue. Won't get them all, but it'll take enough out to where you will have a decent flavor. Whereas in like a wine, sometimes that's a good characteristic of a wine. You'll notice it when you smell it. You'll get that sulfury smell, and after it ages, it can become kind of sweet. You left your phone in Kenny's truck. Yeah, just $200 a night plus fees. Don't forget fees and taxes and all that good stuff. I ain't talking about myself. What you talking about, Willis? Poor Toby left his keys. Toby, don't talk like that on my. Don't talk. Come in and talk like that. This is an educational. This ain't your shit show, brother. Don't do it. Toby, I'll tell you what, brother. I like you like a brother, but if you're going to come to my podcast to troll, this ain't the shit show. I'll ban you from it. So the shit show's fine. We can crack jokes. We can kid with each other. But on this podcast, this is instructional videos. This ain't for shit talking. So say that for Friday night. And I don't want to repeat that. Have to repeat that. Show some respect. No, I ain't a rocket scientist. Not a rocket science. If I was, I'd probably be working with Elon. And I'd be a mega millionaire by now. Yeah, it takes a while for me to get down that far. I usually try to answer the ones up there, so I didn't see them until now. But five, awesome, brother. We're all learning. When you think you know it all, you just getting started, man. Nobody does. Yeah, Yeah, and help, those eggshells in there and using a little bit less and replenishing the grain. Yep, I know what you mean. It'll keep going, brother. I mean, usually I'll stop it if I get lacto. If I start getting the lacto in it, that's when I'll generally stop it because I don't want that. I don't want lacto in my sour mash. So if I do get that, you can do two things. You can either stop it and start a new one, or you can just say, I don't care about the yeast bed and all the yeast that's in there. I'm gonna pour hot fucking back set, straight out of the still at 160 in there, and kill off the lacto, and then just keep going. So you can kill your lacto off. But usually it's a struggle. After you start getting a little lacto in your sour mash, it begins a struggle. A lot of times it's best to clean everything out, put your star sand in there, and I mean you have to scrub and clean to get that lacto out. But that lactobacillus bacteria, once you get it out, you can go back to doing it again. But make sure you get it off all your equipment. Don't use wood paddles for stirring because that shit gets in the pores, along with the wild yeast and other things. Yeah, yeah. And you can use like regular copper. I mean, if you want to take half-inch copper and just chop it into rings, it's called Raschig rings, Raschig rings. And yeah, definitely. Yeah, you definitely starting with wines and meads and beers. If you like beer, perfect place to start because a lot of everything that you learn in winemaking will get carried over, of course, into making a brandy. That's basically what you're doing when you make a brandy. You have to make a wine first, or when you do tequila washes and sugar washes, we talk about washes and then mashes with grains. Basically like a beer. So once you learn to make beer and wine, then you know pretty much got it made because the only next step after that will be distilling it. So yeah, I'm a chilling scientist, stilling, yeah, chilling and stilling. Yeah, you definitely don't want that. That shit's nasty. I've seen it. The acid gets in mixed with that from the vapor path, and I mean, it looks bad after just one use, and it can ruin your distillate. Horrible, horrible, horrible thing to use. Make sure you got the right thing. Hey Kenny, I think Toby left his keys in your truck. Uh, but yeah, distilling's a great hobby, brother. And you know, join the Moonshine Militia. You've probably been watching Philbilly on YouTube. So join the militia and tune in here every Wednesday and Saturday. Except this Saturday, I won't be here. I'll be at a festival. But every Wednesday and Saturday to ask your questions and uh, join the group, the Moonshine Militia, or DIY Shine and stuff on Facebook, and you can ask your questions there. And we got a lot of people there that can help you get started. We got files that has some recipes that'll help you get started. I think I got a Stampede Steel recipe book that has, it's an old one that they used to send with the steels when you got them, and it's got a bunch of basic, recipes that are pretty easy to follow. Um, and that'll get you started. But jumping in, asking questions, or watching the old episodes, especially like a few weeks back. So I guess maybe a month ago, I started focusing on making wines and brandies, and then last week I did grains, and then the last episode I went into more scientific explanation of how the enzymes convert a lot of the complex starches and breaks them down into fermentable sugars. So go back and watch some of the old episodes, and it you know, a lot of times your questions, you know, you want to watch a video, and they're, you know, like George and Phil Billy and a lot of them, there's lots and lots and lots of videos, but trying to get the exact information that you're looking for may take a while, you know. But looking through watching the different videos, like in George's and stuff, he'll be, you know, talking about certain things in particular, but it might not cover the question that you have. So ask it in the group, or watch a few of those. The last month up till today's episodes probably been some of the most productive. If you can start, I should have named them, but I guess if you go back about a month, I guess it was maybe the last of June, the 1st of July, Wednesday and Saturday shows. I did the brandy, and then followed up the next, I guess, Wednesday or Saturday with more on the topic, and then did the same thing with grains, you know, beginning to end, um, start to finish, basically. And so those, you know, just following those and follow along. I'm getting ready to do a little, uh, probably won't do a video, but I'm going to do a little written how to step for step, you know, breakdown for beginners, you know, I'll probably start with a thin mash, which I'll have you using basically just cornmeal, sugar, water, and yeast. And that's it. You know, maybe a little nutrient if you want to throw in there or something like that. But that'll be what's called a thin mash. And it's basically a grain flavored sugar shine. And it'll make an okay drink, but it's great for beginners. It'll make a little bit of a corn tasting liquor, but it's not a true corn liquor until you convert right. But you know, you've got a lot of help and in the groups, and you know, buying a still. You know, that a lot of people go out and buy a still, and they say, "Okay, I'm ready for my first question," and it's like your first question should have been before you bought that still. You know, because we could help guide you to something that might work a little better for you, that requires less upgrades and improvements and modifications to get where you need to be. So, asking group, yeah, join the militia and the DIY shining stuff on Facebook, and we'll help you get started and get going. I recommend a keg steel or a bever, you know, either 13, 18 and a half. Make sure you get the football one with that ferrule on top, because it makes it very modular. So you can add a column on there. You can put a whiskey head on there. Phil Billy, a few other people, Wayne at Ozark. There's a few others that's what they do. You know, they make parts for the bevers, for the kegs, and they also build steels. You know, like you saw in the melon video that they were talking about earlier. You know, so anything in between. So you can start with a $35 keg, and it's got a 2-inch ferrule. So you get you a little, you know, get on philbilly.com, get you a little column to go on that, or I guess eBay might have them, Amazon, Wayne. Most people carry those, and you slap that bad boy on there, and you're ready to start. You know, you can start distilling. Not going to be the best, but it'll turn out some damn good product. You'll surprise yourself and your friends. So it's a great hobby. It's a lot of fun, and I encourage people to do it. But again, you know, local laws, depending on what state you're in, vary. So do it at your own risk, and just don't talk about it a lot, and definitely don't sell it. don't get caught selling it. Don't talk about selling it on here or on Facebook, because everybody's watching that. So it's a lot of fun though. It's an enjoyable hobby, and if you're small scale, most of the time they're not interested in you. Once you get them, you know, 100-gallon steels and then big ass huge steels, then they kind of open their eyes a little bit, because they know you ain't drinking that much. So, but if you keep it a hobby and join the home distillers organization or association or something like that, and you know, that might give you a little leg up too, and if you get in trouble. But I think the first offense is probably a misdemeanor, probably a class 2 misdemeanor, something like that. And so it's not too bad. But try not to get caught, and try not to tell too many people, and just enjoy the hobby. You know, it's a lot of fun. A thumper depends on what you're going to use it for. Usually with the thumper, if I'm just doing a straight run of grain liquor, I put tails in it just so I can get increased alcohol production and use up my tails from the last grain run I did. I try not to mix tails, so like if you do a plum brandy, probably not going to be good tails to put into a grain run the next time. You know, it's going to be maybe funny tasting, but yeah, I just put tails in there and run those out, increase my alcohol production, or never put water in there. But you could put a little bit of your mash in there if you want to, and carry some of that flavor over. A lot of people do that. Or if it's small enough and you've got a drain and an infusion port, you can use your small thumpers. And I say small, you can use any thumper to infuse. But if you've got a 5 gallon thumper and you're going to have to pour 2 gallons of infusion juices, that's puree, fruit puree a lot of times, and that's a lot. It is expensive. So if you keep them a little bit smaller and use them more as an infuser than a thumper per se or a doubler or whatever, um, you'll probably get more flavor carry forward, and you can dump that flavor out and infuse more. Every jar you get off, you can just dump, add more, dump, add more as every quart comes off that steel. That way, each of them's getting infused with as much of that before it gets kind of watered down. You know, because the reason it increases proof is because it leaves water behind, which is one of the reasons you don't want to put water in it to start, because you're starting out on the wrong foot. It's already starting to build up water. Yeah, everybody wants to steal for Christmas. I tell Santa I'm not bringing them. Yeah, I think thumpers are overused. I think they have a purpose and they have a use, but I think people try to use them for every distillate they make, and I think that's a problem and an issue. So they do is a tool, and I agree it has a use, but for everything you do, no, it's not. It's not good for everything that you do. Right. Exactly. You don't always use it. Good analogy. Yep. And it just prematurely starts to fill your thumper up, which can become a problem if it doesn't get enough heat. So a lot of people, they get a lot of water build up in their thumpers and it fills up, and then it starts, causing a lot of back pressure and puking. And a lot of times it's because it's too far away from your steel, and you're condensating a lot of your steam, and it's cooling off by the time it gets there, and it's not able to maintain a specific heat level in there. So move it, plummet closer to your steel, or you can always add some pipe insulation, to your lines going into your thumper to try to maintain that heat. But I do think a lot of people have their thumpers a little bit too far away from their steel, and you lose a lot of efficiency. I don't know. I haven't seen Jimmy in quite some time, Barry. I've not seen him on in a while. I'm gonna have to check his Facebook page out, man. I don't know. I haven't seen. Let me check it right now. As a matter of fact, I haven't seen him. I hope he's doing all right. Let me do something else real quick here while I'm thinking about it. I can go ahead and post to the rest of these groups the link so they can watch it later. Let me do that real quick, and then I'll check on Jimmy. I hadn't seen him post. I ain't heard anything from him in a while. I like old Jimmy. Let me finish here. But yeah, I used to jump on a lot, and I used to see him post a lot, but I haven't in quite some time. July 14th was the last time he posted, so I reckon he's doing all right, old fart. Let's see, a little message. Yeah. We fix all the misspelled words. Yeah, I ain't seen no Jimmy on in a while. But he posted the 14th of July, so as of then, like a picture of him and his son. Yeah, I hope he's doing all right. Yeah, yeah, it'll drop your ABV. And that's the thing about thumpers. A lot of times when they leave that water behind in the thumper, and it increases the proof. A lot of times you're leaving some flavor behind, because a lot of that flavor gets carried in the water. That water, a lot of those flavonoids and different flavors and stuff that you're tasting bond to water better than they do alcohol. So a lot of times, a lot of that flavor is in, getting kind of lost in that thumper as it turns out higher temp. So yeah, I mean, like if you're doing whiskey, it's okay, especially if you're throwing some tails in there and you're just kind of upping your proof and going through some tails, which is something that we did a lot back in the day. But I did, I did come up with invent a bypass for the thumper. I guess I'm the one that introduced it to everybody in the moonshine industry these days. I noticed when I used a thumper back in the day, I think around '83 when I was using keg stills, um, I had a thumper, and I noticed I was getting a lot of headsy smearing. Every time I used that fucking thumper, it affected my cuts, and I could taste the damn smearing through a lot of my run, right? And I was getting that little bit of head flavor throughout the run. So I think thumpers kind of do a little bit of smearing where it holds a lot of those heads early on, and the four shots get mixed up in that water in there, and it's an azeotrope, so it bonds to it, and every little bit that comes out has a few atoms attached to it of all this stuff, and it causes smearing. So I invented the bypass where it comes straight out of your still, bypasses your thumper, goes straight into your condenser. You make your cuts. When you get to your hearts, you open up that bypass, and then it sends just hearts to your thump. That way, you're not feeling your thump, especially if you got them infused with flavor. So you got a big old jug of daily strawberry in there. I'm talking about the big daily strawberry mix. Got the real fruit in it. Expensive. That's a good infuser. So if you got a big old jug of that in there, you don't want all your heads and all your four shots bubbling through that and bonding and getting saturated into that and smearing throughout the run. So you use that bypass. Then when you hit your hearts, you open it up, and then of course you're going to get vapors coming in there. It's going to start heating up and then start re-distilling. You get that second distillation in there. At the same time, you're getting a lot of that infusion from the fruits, and it doesn't smear like that. So it definitely helps cut back on that as well. So thumpers are definitely not something. They're definitely an advanced tool, and something most beginners shouldn't really be fooling with. And it's the worst thing that they ever put on them little bever steels. Um, one thing I will say about it, most of the time they don't put the copper downspout downcomer in there properly, so it ends up being a puke box, which catches puke, slobber box. So it's good for that, for beginners that run it too hot and fill up too much and have it foam over and puke over, so it catches a lot of that before it gets to the, to the condenser. So, you're not going to get, a ruined run from puking. But so they're okay for as a slobber box to catch a lot of that puke for the beginners. But really, kind of an advanced tool that you probably shouldn't use just starting out. But the infusers, if you have a small little copper infuser, kind of like a jar rig, but made of copper with your infuser and a little drain in it, those work great, to keep adding flavor and bubble through, because it really doesn't, you're not getting a lot of it heats up really quickly because it's a small volume and it doesn't trap a lot of water. It just basically processes through pretty quickly. And if it does, you got to drain, you can drain some out and add some more flavor. And those jar rigs and infusers really do add good flavor. You'll see on Phil Billy's um, melon run, doing a good mash with them gives it that good flavor that he's talking about staying on his tongue for a long time. It gives you that flavor in the mash that you actually taste. But a lot of times that infuser, you get it up front, and a lot of times that up front flavor is actually you smelling it as you drink it. So you're smelling it and tasting it a little bit, and it gives you that first punch, and you get a lot of that from infusion, and then you get that follow up from having that same fruit that you mashed in. So basically, if you did a sugar wash and just infused with the melon, you'd get that first taste, but at the end you wouldn't have anything. You wouldn't have that melon flavor at the end. But if you if you have both, then you get it at the first and you get it in the tail end of it too. So watch that video; it's good. He's paying too much for a dollar each, man. You could have brought them for 50 cents or a quarter a piece. I guarantee you probably get it for a dime, because they're about to plow them under. Basically, that or they just slop their hog with it. Oh, so you're not 21 yet? Yeah, I don't know, man. Be real careful. But wine, in most places, making your own homemade wine and beer is legal. A great way to start, especially if you're under 21. Probably shouldn't be doing it all. Maybe, get your family involved. Maybe your dad. But yeah, I'm not going to say anything if you're under 21. I'm not going to. I get in trouble with my wife. So let's just. You meant the 21st of the month, right? Yeah, it's a lot of fun. There's James. Good to have you on here, brother. Different James, though. I thought you were talking about the different Jimmy Martin. There's another Jimmy Martin, too, that's been around for a long, long time. I wonder if they're any relation. Well, different states have different priorities. Um, I will say, if you live in North Carolina, watch your ass and don't post that shit on TikTok. Don't post it online, because they're watching, they're strict, and they give a fuck. They have nothing better to do. They have ALE. That's basically it's all they do. They sit around the office waiting for somebody to break the alcohol law, and so they can go get them. So they're bored motherfuckers, and they do. They'll follow up, and they have. We've had several of our friends, at least 4 or 5 I know of, in the last year or two get popped because of either neighbors or people seeing them, LA seeing them doing it on TikTok or online. So certain states, you gotta watch your ass. North Carolina is one of them. In Missouri, just the opposite. It's legal. You can do up to 100 gallons a year as long as you're 21 or older. And if you have two people in the house that are 21 or older, you can do up to 200 gallons a year, but that's the max. And I guess that means you can have 200 gallons on you at any time, because how they know how much you're drinking. So just don't have more than 200 gallons with two people of age, and you'll be fine. Different states, different amounts. Some states it's still illegal to own the still. Some states you can have the still, but they have to prove that you're using it for something other than, making tinctures or, distilling water or essential oils. That's another good one. So there's lots of uses for a still other than just making liquor. So, watch laws and watch your six, so. Okay, here's a question. For an all grain run, let's say a single malt, what's your recommendation for a pound of grain to gallon of water? Everyone's different. Just a few years in, I'd like to hear you take. It really depends on the grains that you're using. I don't do a lot of single grain. Most of the single grain I've done has been corn. I hate to say it, but I've never done an all barley single malt yet. I'm ashamed to say it. I should have a long time ago, but I'm a corn guy. I like having that corn in there and making the bourbon and the whiskey. I like the flavor a little better than the Scotchy malt. But that doesn't, I should, and I'm probably going to, but it depends on the amylase as well. We were talking about different amylases that you can use, and this glucanase really helps break down a lot of the glucans that you build up when you do an all grain. It gets real gluteny, sticky, that clear, not clear, but kind of milky stickiness that you get, and everything's just real sticky, kind of like the corn gelatinizes. Well, if you can use, the glucanase on that, it'll help. And I think there's a couple of others. Sebflow makes a good amylase that will break up those glucans. It's a glucanase, a polynase, that will help break up those glucans and make it a lot more manageable. But I haven't done a lot of single grains except like corn. But it's something I'm going to do. As far as pound wise, again, it would depend. Like if you're doing an all wheat or an all rye, um, or an all barley, that's going to get gummy. So you really need that polynase or a glucanase to break up that gumminess, and to make it more manageable, and to make it work best. Of course, you're going to need the other amylases as well, but that helps thin everything out and break everything down. But yeah, a 2.5 is a pretty 2 to 2.5 pounds per gallon of water is a pretty good starting place. Um, I would say write down, document at the top of your document, call it beer. Don't say whiskey mash, just say beer, because you're making a beer, right? It's a beer mash. That's what you're making. And you distill the beer into whiskey. So if they find your notes, yeah, that's what I used to make beer. No law against that. Or wine for brandy. Label it wine. Keep your notes, but just label it wine. Don't leave a paper trail and say this is how I make my high proof brandy. Don't do it. So just call it wines and beers on your notes, and just but keep notes and try 2 pounds. And if you get a gravity of 1050 or 1055 and it's a little light and everything you feel converted well, then throw in some dextrose next time. Maybe go 2.25 pounds. I think 2.25, for a lot of people is kind of a sweet spot. 2 to 2.5. I tend, if it's going to have corn in it, I'm going 2.5 to 3, depending on how much corn. But the more adjunct grains that I add to it, the lower the poundage because of the glucans. But I'm gonna get me some of the Seb Flow that helps a lot with that. It's Polonaise that'll help a lot with that stickiness and stuff because I use wheat a lot, and I really like the sweetness that the wheat brings. So I'm digging that, but I don't use a lot of rye, but I do use wheat and barley a lot. And I would say start with 2.25, and see what kind of gravity you get off that, and step mash that, see what kind of gravity you get with it, and if it's a little light, maybe you can um, go with a little bit more grain the next time, or just throw in a little bit of dextrose. You won't taste it. It's not like you're making a sugar shine if you're just bumping something from 105.5 up to 106.5. With just a couple few scoops of glucose, depending on how big, of course, your mash is, your beer mash is. So yeah, just keep notes, and you'll find your own sweet spot. But I think 2.25 is a pretty good spot that will give you a pretty decent starting gravity. Won't get too thick and gummy on you. But if using that Seb Flow is really key to doing like an all grain like that for sure. And I'm going to get me some. And you can get it at Firm Solutions. I'm not sure who else has it, but Firm Solutions out of Danville. Great people. They deal with everybody. You don't have to be commercial. They'll mail order to anybody that wants to buy it. They make good high temp alpha and beta, or high temp alpha and gluco amylase liquids. So you can, look at the offerings they have in that as well. And they make excellent yeast. They have a lot of yeast. The guy that runs it and owns it, Patrick Heiss, is probably the most knowledgeable person on distilling and the science of distillation in the world. Brilliant person. If you can look him up, and he Wilderness Trail Distillery and Firm Solutions, people from all over the world seek him out in his lab to answer many questions. They genetic sequence, bacteria, other problems that other people have, issues. They're the shit. I mean, they got the yeast bank. They got probably thousands of yeast, and Patrick could sit for 30 minutes and just name you scientific names for yeast after yeast. It's just, dude's amazing, man. It's what he does. He's passionate about it. If I would have been as passionate about it, and I've done this for a living, I would probably have a little more knowledge than I have now. But I've always had a passion for it and enjoy doing it, which is where I got my knowledge, because I have to enjoy something before I'll seek that knowledge. Kind of like math, it sucked and I didn't do well. But science I love, so I applied myself and learned more. But yeah, it's dude's brilliant. Anything you can find that he talks about, or any discussions there. I think Alan Bishop's had him on his show. I think Still Talking. We're going to have him on, and didn't, or maybe they followed up and did have him on later. I don't know. I know they had him scheduled for one and didn't do it. But yeah, anytime you can see Patrick Heiss talking about stuff, you need to watch it, because that dude is brilliant. He's a very, very intelligent man. He is the man. But yeah, start out with 2.25, see what you get, and get some of that Seb Flow for sure. It helps. It helps thin those glucans out. It's a Polonaise. Yeah, it's entertainment. There's not a lot of education, but every once in a while they do touch on something in there that is real and educational, but not as often. It's like Mark and Digger. Oh, look, we got, what the hell is this? Like lacto. Like it's the first time they've seen a lacto infection, and these guys been distilling for fermenting and distilling for 30, 40 years since popcorn days. Those motherfuckers know it's all for TV. So they knew what they had. It's all, wow, what's that? It's all acting. It's all fun though. It's entertainment. Yeah, that's for sure, brother. They need us on there, don't they, Clint? A little of both. A little of both. I'd say, do a lot of reading. Do a lot of reading and watching videos and watch my past videos. Watch George, and his videos. Um, Cyrus has some good videos. Watch his videos. There's a lot of educational videos out there that do the same thing I'm doing. Them a lot, not enough. But that's why I'm here, is to try to help fill the void. George doesn't do them anymore. His YouTube channel got bought out by some wealthy person that wanted to, I guess he was making pretty good money. I don't make a penny on this. I help Phil Billy out. He pays for the StreamYard, and I don't know if he makes money for all the viewers I bring or whatever. But anyway, I can help him out. I'm happy to. He pays for the StreamYards and gives me a platform to teach on. I enjoy teaching. I'm not poor, so I'm not hard up for money. I'm not saying I wouldn't like a little extra, but I'm not on here for a $13 check, every stream or whatever a lot of people get for what they do. That's just it's not my purpose. But yeah, Phil Billy has a lot of good educational stuff. He tries a lot of different things. A lot of people these days are trying, a lot of different things. I mean, he'll do everything from Fruit Loops to watermelon to cantaloupes. Hell, he distilled some of his piss once. I don't know. He's crazy. He's wild. But I love old Phil Billy, man. He's a good dude. Damn good dude, man. He's an easygoing guy, and just get along with anybody. Kind of like me. Just everybody loves Phil Billy, man. He's a great guy. Yep. Yeah, I'd say George, Phil Billy, Cyrus, and me probably. Alan Bishop, anytime he does something, if you can find some of his videos, is definitely going to be educational for you. I know there's a lot of education, like Amanda does a class. Amanda Bryant from the show. She does a class. I think Alan is going to eventually start doing some classwork as well. I've heard some other people doing it, but I'm not sure their knowledge base. So I'm not really going to recommend anybody, but Amanda and Alan definitely very knowledgeable. Be a great class to have if you want to go learn hands-on and meet Amanda and a lot of times for a lot of people it's easier if you do something, and I'm one of those people. You can sit and talk to me till I'm blue in the face, and if once I do a hands-on type experience, everything becomes much easier, which is why I try to use a lot of visual aids and throw up stuff like this when I'm trying to explain it, because a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So I try to show as much as I can. Yeah, you can throw your tails in the thump. You can add them to the mash. Hell yeah. Don't don't add them to the mash before you ferment, right before you run it. Yeah, absolutely. Increases your production. And see, the thing about a lot of people, let me pull up the chart here. A lot of people will try to rerun heads, and I've never been one of those people, for one reason. It's hard to separate that acetone from the dark blue from the light blue. So you can run it again and again and again and again, but you're still adding heads back into your boiler. Why? I can't imagine why. Just to get that little bit of alcohol out? Hell to the no. I don't care about that. Maybe if you're, making 10 million gallons a year and you make bottom shelf liquor, and that's what you're known for, is cheap bottom shelf liquor, and you're trying to stretch every drop, yeah, maybe then, because people expect that and they get that, they pay for that. But anything from jar 1 through 5, hell to the no. Now 6, once you start getting low heads, then if you're going to age, that 6 through 16, would probably be fine if you're going to age it in a barrel for 4 to 6, 8 years, right? Because a lot of the stuff that's in that, a lot of those heads and the esters and the acids will estrify over time and create some interesting flavors. But yeah, I mean, look, a lot of people cut their distilling off at jar 14, 15, maybe 16, right? When they start getting a little bit of tails. But look at all that alcohol, and you can separate that without getting the tailsy smell in it and get good liquor out of it, right? So 15 especially, I mean, there's a lot of good liquor in 15, and that's 80 proof. You know, a lot of people stop there when they get into the 80, 90s. That's usually a lot of times when you're distilling, when it cuts off, and discount these temperatures at the top. Don't look at those. That's not applicable for pot distilling, so I don't even know why they're up there. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna edit those out. I don't like them. They're stupid. They don't belong there. Whoever made the chart. Two, with the 4 shots, we know that 4 shots will carry throughout the whole run. We do know that they come off at a higher proportion early, but technically that red, there should be a little red line under the 2, 3, and 4, and maybe 20 dots and 5, 18 dots, 16, 15, 14, till you get all the way to 20, and maybe a few dots of red, because there will be some. It's just not in any kind of concentration to worry about, or affect flavor or make you go blind. But they are there, and that's just to be aware, that they are still there. But yeah, putting those tails, get that alcohol from 15, 16, 17, 18 out, and then once you get to 20, just put it in your tails bucket, and all those in your tails bucket, run it again. But I wouldn't continuously run them. So if you're running tails, especially if you're sour mash, you're going to have to run it all the way down, right? So your back set doesn't have a whole lot of proof in it. So pretty much the thing that you're throwing into your sour mash is green, all green. It's all tails, right? Acidified tails and flavors from your back set, and from that's what a lot's left in the boiler. You have a lot of water and a lot of oils and other higher boiling point alcohols and esters and other compounds that require higher temperature to cook off. Yeah, once you get used to that amylase, that high temp, that thick corn, plus steeping instead of cooking, using the steep method, help prevent you from scorching. Just keep adding that hot water, for an hour and a half, 90 minutes to 2 hours, whatever, to gelatinize that corn and continuously stir it. But if you steep with high temperature water instead of cooking, you run a lot less risk of scorching too. So that's something good for beginners. If you got a really big ass chest cooler that's like 40-gallon cooler or something like that, you can, put that gelatinizing corn in there at 190. It'll hold that temperature a lot hotter, because coolers not only hold cool temperatures, they hold hot temperatures hot too, like a thermos. Yeah, that's probably one of the biggest problems, Clint, is people, and they're trying to help. So I try not to browbeat them down and beat them down too much, because they're just trying to help, So it's hard to be hard on them and tough on them, because they just want to share what they've learned and help people. But a lot of times the source of information that they learned from wasn't the best, and they were mistaught, or they misread something, and there's a lot of bad advice being given out as a result. £3, yeah. I do about 2.5. That's my general go-to. If I do like an all corn, I'll do a little heavier. But a lot of times I'm using wheat and barley, so I'm down to 2.5. Yeah, you definitely using probably glucobuster. Yeah, it's probably a glucan polonaise. It's probably just a different brand name that they put on a polonaise, but it's a glucanase. I think we learned that all glucanases are polonaises, but not all polonaises are glucanases. So I would say it is a that Sebflow is probably definitely a glucanase that's breaking down the glucans. What's going on, Rocky? All right, which setup did you get, brother? Did you get the 3 pot? See, this is where you should. Your first question should have been before you bought that still, but we can work with it, brother. Which beverage still did you get? You probably answered that question, and I hadn't scrolled down to it yet, so I'm gonna look down. But welcome to the craft, Rocky. Sugar wash, cracked corn mash. Yeah, that works. That's basically sugar and cornmeal. You know, it's just and that's a good way to start. So you got the start out right. Yeah, yeah. See, you know, and that goes into also. I've never done. You know, as I said, I've never done 100% all rye or all wheat or all barley. So I'm probably the worst person to ask on that. Uh, but I do know using the Sebflow and the glucanases definitely helps on that. I'm used to using percentages of them in the corn, so 20, sometimes 30%. It can get gooey, and I definitely can tell the difference in that versus just all corn. But because I've got the corn and the high temp in there before they're even close to being added, I've got the benefit of having that alpha amylase in there as I'm adding it because I step down. So as I cool off in temperature to the 150, 55 degree, let me show you the chart. 150, 55 degree. Why do I click that button every time? No idea. So as I get to the 150, 55 range for the barley malt right here, see 150, 45, 55. As I get into that range, that alpha is already, thinned out all that corn and made it pretty thin. So as I'm adding more grains, that are very glucony, it's got the benefit of having that alpha in there immediately start debranching because the barley malt does have alpha and sufficient enough alpha for itself and a lot of the corn, but you add that alpha that's in there already, and it really helps break down um, these adjunct grains pretty well. Whereas if you started with just that, I'd imagine it'd be a big ass mess. I've not done it. I need to, get some experience. I do want to do an all barley, scotchy, malty, liquor and make a scotch. It's not one of my favorites. I definitely prefer a sweeter bourbon, a higher proof, sweeter bourbon to a scotch. To me, scotch has a really strong bite to it. Uh, and different flavors. But I mean, I don't hate it, but I definitely prefer the bourbons and whiskeys to just like a, a scotch. It's a pulinase, pull with a P. This glucanase, or the sebflow. The sebflow, what we're talking about here, I think, yeah, Clint mentioned it right after you asked your question. The sebflow, or the viscoseb, is what helps your viscosity and the thickness from the glucans. But the glucanase is probably what's in the sebflow. It's a glucanase, and those the glucanase would fall under the pulinase. Let's see. I've got a picture of the pulinase. No, I'll have to get me a picture of pulinase, but it's a lot like the glucanase that you see here. This is the glucanase, and the pulinase is going to be very similar to that. So it just basically breaks up those glucans real well and thins it out, much like an alpha does the gel in the corn. And they're a must. You must have. Exactly. And that's why I try to do the steep method instead of the cooking method. As I do the steep method, it's cooling down right from the 185 to 190 that I'm cooking the corn at, gelatinizing the corn. And as it cools, when it gets to 155, I've still got a gallon or two of hot water there that I can add to it to hold that temperature, because that's shit, wrong chart. You want to hold those temperatures and until you can get all the starch conversion that you can. So at least half an hour to 45 minutes, and you can add hot water to keep it in that range. I'm used to using it because I used to use the powdered amylase, the powdered alpha, and it works at 145 to 55. And if you don't keep it in that range for a long period of time, you don't get that proper conversion like you would with a liquid immediate. So yeah, definitely powdered alpha amylase is thing of the past. Definitely use the liquids. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the FSI 927 has a firm solution yeast too that's really good for whiskeys. Didn't like didn't like what? Yeah, yeah, that's still at Jesse Beard Board. Yep, absolutely. What didn't I like, Dustin? I mean, I don't mind lacto. I do like the flavor of lacto. I don't like what it does. I just, I mean, I've got it in my watermelon mash. You know, it came late, which was great. Um, I just don't like it coming early in a fermentation. I don't want it to come early because it competes with the alcohol for sugars, and it likes alcohol too. So yeah. Right. So when you get to 80, you get to the tails, and but keep collecting, um, and run those tails in the next run. Run them in your thumper, because there's a lot of. It's easy to separate the ethanol from those oils than it is the ethanol from the acetaldehyde and ethyl acetates and all those. So you can definitely get better ethanol out of the tails than you can the forers or the heads. Yeah, just save them all. Yeah, just have your bucket marked tails, And when you start getting to the tails, just dump everything in the bump or put it under your drip. That way you don't have to change out jars. I'm not saying walk away from the still, never leave your still unattended, but you don't have to be as alert. You can be cleaning up, doing other things, and putting up jars and maybe proofing or checking, the proof and doing some things like that, making some blends and cuts while it's dripping, the hearts out. Sometimes I'll admit if I don't have a sour mash going and I'm in a hurry and sometimes I'll just dump the damn tails, man. I'll just down the drain, bro. There you go. Sometimes I just don't have the time to dedicate to run it all the way out. So yeah, you can throw all your tails in the tub. The late tails, which when you start getting tired, boys. I had to mow grass today, man. I don't push mower in that 93-degree temperature. And my grass is big, and I had to mow it almost twice back and forth on that shit. And I was sapped, man. I came in, took me a shower. It was right before the show, man. I was pretty tuckered out when I started the show. I just came in, took a shower, ate, and then jumped on here. So I was, oh man, pretty tired. I got about a third acre I use push mower on, so that's how I get my exercise. I guess one of these days I'll nose plow into the ground dead of a heart attack out there mowing. Just so I can get that riding mower fixed. But yeah, you can run it all the way down. A lot of people run it down to like 10. Once you get to 10 to 20 proof, watch a few of these. He did I was talking about it on one of my podcasts and stuff. So he's like, I want to put this to the test. So he did a little test on sweet waters and using them to proof with, and you get more alcohol because, let's face it, when you're proofing with something that's got some alcohol in it and not a lot of oils, by the time you get down to there, you pass the oily stage and you're basically just getting like a little bit of water and ethanol and maybe a few other really high boiling point congeners, but furfurols maybe in there, but it makes it pretty decent for proofing, and you can get some interesting flavors and you can get a little more alcohol out of it. So sweet waters, and it doesn't cloud up on you as badly, and you can get sometimes a little bit below 80, whereas a lot of times 80 you'll start seeing some cloudiness, and that's just because the alcohol content has gotten so low that it can no longer keep the oils dissolved in the solution. So, and then you keep going, and then you see after a while, maybe even if it's cold, you see little fat molecules from the oils saponify. Yeah, yeah, you can boil it and cook it. A lot of people doing the steep method these days. They'll get a fermented, a insulated fermenter, or like a cooler, a big ass cooler. Like if you got a big long fishing cooler you put on your boat, 80-gallon or 60, 120 quart cooler or whatever, you can put your mash and your drill bit and your boiling water in that and gelatinize in that, and it'll hold those temperatures, well, where you can take like a 55-gallon drum and get some spray foam and put maybe a 40, inside that, and spray foam around it and insulate it and make an insulated fermenter. Now, I will say, when you do that, it takes forever and ever and ever for the temperature to get down to where you can pitch barley and stuff. So if you don't have a chiller, it's one of those I'll come back in a few hours kind of things. And it's one of those you go find something better to do than sit and watch paint dry. So, but yeah, using steep method kind of lose the risk of scorching. I also know I have a friend that is on Master Distiller that does a Trying to think what we call it. When you use 2 pots, a double boiler type setup, and he'll boil that out or water and keep it boiling and hot while that inner pot and gelatinize it that way and stir it with his, and that way he doesn't run the risk of scorching. And double boiler works real well. A little less efficient, but you're definitely not going to scorch it. And as we know, that scorching is one of the few things that you can do that's really an unfixable. It's like messing up a foundation when you're building. It's just one of those incurables. So you scorch the shit out of it, you might as well just feed the animals if they'll even eat it. Most won't even touch it, so it's ruined. But that's about the only thing. That's one good thing about distillation is if it doesn't taste good, run it again. If it still doesn't taste good, run it again. If it still doesn't taste good, put it on a column, scrub that shit, and just into pure ethanol, and that's all you'll get is pure ethanol. And then you can use it to what chart? This one. Yeah, everybody should have this chart on your phone or anytime you cooking or step mashing for beer or whiskey or whatever. Definitely an essential tool. I can't remember all the numbers, so I rely on it quite a bit. Never used it as a source of amylase. I've used it as a source for, some of the sweetness and some of the meads and stuff, but does it have amylytic properties? Yeah, you don't want to use temp at all. The only thing I really keep track of temp wise, and that's why I hate the temps at the top of the chart. Actually, I'm gonna cut those out because it just confuses people. And I'll actually show you a chart why it's bullshit right here. So that chart, let's see, what does it say? At 185 to 90. Well, yeah, let me. Well, I guess I've got that cut off. Good. But anyway, so I think it's saying at 175 or something, 4 shots are coming off. We know that's bullshit, right? This is why 175 degrees. The only thing that would be coming off is, let me take that out of there, is if you had 160 proof in your boiler, which I highly do not recommend because you could get into an explosive situation. So at 80%, that's 160 proof, and that's the only time that you're going to see anything come off at that temperature is because as the water content increases, the boiling point increases, but as the alcohol content increases, the boiling point decreases, right? And it's because of the azeotrope. So when you mix alcohol and water together, you're lowering the boiling point of water and you're raising the boiling point of the liquor, unless it's pure on each end. So at 173.1, we know pure ethanol will boil off at that temperature. But once you start adding water to it, the boiling point changes because of the azeotropic properties and how it bonds together. So this chart, whoever did that, it's useless. It's bullshit. Now they may be vapor temps, maybe what they're talking about, vapor temps and not pot temps. That could be. That'd make a lot more sense. But these are pot temps, and at a pot temp of, and I've seen a lot of people say, well, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. I had some 10%, and at 185, I seen, what they saw was at the very bottom of the still on the propane burner or whatever before they put the cap on. They looked down there and they saw some bubbling going on, and there was something happening. because at the bottom of that pot that's coming in contact with that fire is a lot hotter than where that thermometer is at the middle of their liquid, in the middle of their still, right, measuring their liquid temp. So yeah, in the middle of the still, that liquid temp is going to be, you know, 185, but down there next to the very bottom where that propane is hitting the metal and the metal's hitting the liquid, that's 195. You know, so yeah, you're going to see something coming off at 10 because you're right in the range where you're going to start seeing something come off at 10, 12. So that's why, you know, yeah, you can look at the bottom and see, but just remember the bottom of that pot is hotter than the liquid towards the middle or top where those thermometers generally are. And that's why you'll see a little bit of smoke and haze. It's just because it already is starting to boil ethanol at the bottom of the still, because where it comes into contact with that propane and that steel, it's hot as fuck. It's 195, 200 degrees, right? So it's gonna start producing some steam that'll come out, but still your liquid temp in the middle is not as hot, but you'll still get some bubbling up. And that's just because of the temperature gradients, you know, inside that vessel. Gary, are you in the militia and DIY shiny stuff? It's in the files, but yes, I can share them with you. I can share them all. Let me pull you up. I'll do it right now while I'm thinking about it, or else I'll forget bigger than hell. I'm pretty forgetful. Gary. How could we not be friends, Gary? Gotta friend me up, brother. I see you. I'll send you. Maybe we are friends. Yeah, let's see. It says be profile. So here we go. I got you, brother. All right, let me drop them all in there. Hold on a second, brother. You'll get a big wave of shit coming through. I'm gonna lay it on you, my friend. If I can find the goddamn file. All right, brother. I'm not gonna send all this overly technical stuff on you. But I'm gonna start sending you some stuff that's important to have. And anybody else that wants it, friend me up and I'll send this to you, or you can get it in the DIY or the DIY shining stuff or the militia files. But I'll try to share everything I can. Where in the hell we're at? Okay. All right, I did that. Let's see. I'm going to send the most important ones. Boiling point, that one I was just showing you. Let me send those two first. You're probably interested in a lot of that. This helps a little bit. This is a good little chart. Let's see. I'll send that chart too. Just don't follow the temps. Let's see. Diastatic power. I was talking about that at the beginning. So when you want to do your 30 and divide, you know, whatever poundage by 30 and figure out what diastatic power you need. I'll send you this. It's a good little chart. Yeah, here's the gelatinization, saccharification, temps, rest temps. So let's see. Some of this technical stuff you probably don't want, but we can get later if you do. I just want to make sure that you got, there you go. That'll get you started. Unmalted gelatination temp chart. There you go. Not a problem, brother. Yeah, back to temp. The only temperature I pay attention to and very close attention to is my coolant temperature water. So I try to keep it between 65 and 75 degrees. So really that temp right there is probably, while distilling, the most important temp that you'll have on a pot still. I will clarify, on a pot still. Now there are some continuous columns and some other things where temps do matter, um, but for all intents and purposes, what we do on pot stills, the only thing that those do is give you an idea of when you can expect to start seeing a drip. That's the biggest benefit that I get from the thermometers. I'm like, okay, it's at 195. I can expect, that's my vapor temp. So that means the pot temps, probably a little higher than that, or 90, 190. And I'm like, yeah, I should start seeing the drip anytime. And sure enough, yeah, it's good stuff, Richard. You like it. Yeah, if you have any, what they call it, a double chamber pot, or a jacketed steel, um, definitely, you can distill on the grain, but you can also use that steam to cook with and gelatinize and everything, and you don't have to worry about, it's kind of like beans don't burn on the grill kind of thing. You can really cook them quick and gelatinize very quickly that way. Beans will burn on the grill. I'm going to have to start getting into, yeah, that's what I use. It actually, I use the mud mixer they used to mix drywall mud with. Um, I get a good turnover with that. Then yeah, I've used it for years and years. Yeah, I think he's talking about smearing. Yeah, I think he's talking about smearing. Yep. Yeah, you're gonna get smearing. Yeah, yeah. If you run it hard, you're gonna, everything goes over, um, less fractionally. You can't fractionally distill on a pot that we use, a pot still, but that you can go low and slow and help separate a little better and make it a little bit more distinct. So you know we say low and slow and a slow drip, and then I've had beginners like, well, it's been 12 hours, we're still dripping, and it's like, how fast you drip? Well, I'm getting like a drip every 15 or 20 seconds. And it's like, wow, you know. So they're going really, really fucking slow, and they've been sitting there all day. So, I've seen it taken to extremes. So it doesn't have to be that slow. Yeah, good having you in here, brother. Appreciate you, brother. Take it easy. Have a good weekend. Hope you're coming to the festival. Yeah, just be careful not doing that inside, man. Those vapors can build up, especially if you're using open flame. Um, I saw a few years back a dude was had him shipping cargo container, and he had the door shut, and they're pretty airtight, and he had propane going on there, which really wasn't a good idea to begin with. And I guess he was blowing off fours and heads, and I guess the mixture in the air got just right, and it exploded and killed him and peeled open that cargo container. Yeah, you talking about in your jacket? Yeah. So, what are you using? Ethylene glycol or oil, or did you get them all, brother? Yeah, and it depends on your steel. The drip rate that you're going to come off at. Big ass, 100, 200, 300 gallon steel. It's gonna pour. It's not gonna be a drip anymore. It's gonna be pouring. But like a 10 gallon steel, you need to keep it dripping. For $100, I would buy a keg and then save. You know, get a keg for $35. Take it 65 left over. Save a little bit, and then get a one of those columns. They're about $150 that you can put right on a keg, and they come with everything you need. Um, Hillbilly has them, eBay has them, Amazon has them. About everybody that makes steel accessories and parts has them. But yeah, it's a cheap way to get started, and you know, if you want to make that dollar stretch, that's probably the best way to go. The beverage steels, I'm not sure who was talking about earlier. They never did say. I hope you got a football, one of the beverage football steels, because those are pretty modular and easy to modify and use. So if you've got one of those, that's awesome. If you got the three pots, don't tighten up your gaskets too tight and your fittings, or you're going to crack those plastic gaskets that are PTFE. So you want to basically replace a lot of those gaskets that are going to break. A lot of those flex lines, I don't trust that they're made of stainless. I'm not sure what they're made of. I would definitely replace those with some larger diameter copper, 5/8, 3/4. Um, if you got the 2 or 3 pot type, if you got the football steel, you're doing great, because I was talking the columns that you can put on a keg that I was talking about. You can put those on the bever steels as well, and those work out real well. And you can get the copper ones, stainless ones, whatever you want to get, but both those work real well. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, that's right. Especially when you got a big long ass beard like mine, man. Kind of got to be careful when you get around fans, or you know, flywheels or belts or air compressors. I mean, I've had my beard sucked in about every damn thing. That's awesome. Good deal, bro. Yeah, it did me too, man. Especially in that little, well, you know, he had a big fire out there. Wonder why. You know, he had a real big fire out there, probably because of that, getting drunk and not paying attention. Electric, I'm not done yet. I'm gonna do an electric on a steel. I've got a small steel with the ferrule welded in the side. I'm gonna have to weld me a ferrule in my bigger steel and or my bigger keg and start fooling around with a little electrical. Yeah, I've definitely had some lost quite a bit of hair to many different things. Man, once it gets so damn long, man, it's into everything. It's hard to do anything. I was underneath my fiance's car working on the muffler and trying to hang it up with some hangers on after I get it taken in and replace the muffler on it, man. I was rolling around, rolling on my fucking hair, couldn't move my head, and couldn't get my damn hair out from under me. I was stuck in a bad spot. Yeah, yeah, there's cussing. Hope none of the neighbors' kids were close by. There was definitely some cussing going on. But yeah, Slowpoke, on the top of your steel, do you have a just a regular ball valve that you open up when you're done to keep from implosion and stuff? I don't. A lot of people have those automatic vapor lock. You know, what they call them. Getting old, forgetful, but they actuate automatically once the vapor becomes so. Once the pressure becomes reverse pressure becomes so much, it opens out. But I don't trust those cheap ass valves. Yeah, I love my little baby. I've got a little baby football steel too, and you know, I got keg steels. Hell, I got a couple of 80s stainless. But yeah, that little baby for the stove. I've got a stove top that doesn't cycle. It doesn't like turn on and off when it's on, you know, like 8 or 9. It stays on, so I don't have to worry about that cycling issue. And you know, when it gets cold in the wintertime and stuff, I do most of my distilling on that inside in the kitchen. And it does a fine little job, man. Those little 18.5 gallon Beaver footballs, excellent little steels. It's definitely better than the pressure cooker I used when I first got started. So definitely a lot bigger too. All right, guys, it's 11:15. I'm worn out from mowing and doing a lot of things today and getting stuff ready to go to Maggie. I was planning on going tomorrow, but I think I broke a garage window that I have to kind of staple and tape up and patch before I go. I'm gonna have to replace my garage door soon. It's one of them big old wood doors. It's heavy and it's starting to. Oh, I'm not Philbilly. I'm Bad Santa. Philbilly's a lot better looking than me, man. He's a little bit younger too. Yeah, Philbilly's my brother from another mother. I stream on his platform. We run the Moonshine Militia. I'm an admin, and he started the Moonshine Militia. Me, him, and Tom and Damon run it, and the mods are in there. So, Bad Santa, Fat Sam, probably, probably could be called that. Oh, that's funny. Well, actually, yeah, it's a two and a half on the 18.5 gallon. It's a 2.5 inch, so you get a reducer. But inside that football, you can stuff it with your mesh. That football makes a really good whiskey head. So just straight out of that. I'm not real fond of the canister condenser that came with it. It's okay, but I think I've got some negative sloping in there because I'm getting gurgling and a little bit of smearing. Not real bad, but I've got some good shotgun condensers that I use. So, and I love those. So, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm definitely a fat bastard too. All right, guys, definitely Slowpoke. Hit that like, subscribe button here on YouTube, and get on Facebook and look up Moonshine Militia and DIY shining stuff, and join those groups. We help out a lot, help a lot of beginners out in there, and yeah. So we'll hopefully see some of you guys in there in the group. But until I guess next Wednesday, because I won't be on here Saturday. If I do, it's going to be a drunk, hey, we're on, we're Maggie getting hammered and wish you were here kind of thing. So I guess I'll next time I chat with you guys will probably be on next Wednesday, and depending on how hungover I am coming back, if it's a 3-day hangover, I might not have a lot of coursework ready to go over, but I'm going to try to in the next few weeks do a simple how-to step for step for beginners. It's really something that's needed. It's something just they can print out. You can print it out and just kind of follow it, step for step. And if you follow it step for step, you'll end up with a decent product kind of guide, and kind of build and learn from there. So it's something I'll be able to, hand out to a lot of beginners, and yeah, hang around, Clint, and I'll be able to share that with them, so they have something to read to reinforce what they've heard, and a little guide to go by. A lot of people like those little how-to guides, and go by those. So I'm gonna jump off here and start getting my shit together. I already got my overalls and my card, my VIP cards out. I've got my vest I'm gonna wear. I don't care what other people think. I'm gonna show it off. Matter of fact, I will be. I'm gonna do bomber jackets instead of vests. I'm gonna do. This is the cut. Pretty badass. But I'm gonna do a bomber jacket with that on the back, so people won't confuse it with a motorcycle vest cut and worry and all that. So we'll be able to have a bomber jacket that'll look pretty badass, right? I think it'll look cool as fuck on a bomber jacket. So yeah, when you join the militia, we've got a few questions. You might have to scroll down and find them, but there's a few questions that we ask just to make sure that it's not a bot, because there's a lot of bots that automatically try to join groups. It's just an automated bot, and it joins all these groups, and the second it's allowed into a group, it just starts spamming a lot of ads and bullshit and hacks and shit. So we ask a few simple questions just to make sure it's a human on the other end. It doesn't matter. You don't have to be experienced. You don't have to know the right answer. Just say, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm just starting, or something like that. Just so we know that it's a human on the other side. But I will see you guys Saturday if I do a live. Probably be a party live. But we'll see you guys next Wednesday if the good Lord's willing and I don't die of a hangover this weekend to get too drunk. It's definitely going to be a party, and I definitely get hammered. Me and old Wes. There's a few hardcore drinkers that I already know will be hanging around at 2, 3, 4 in the morning getting drunk. All the rest of them are washing their panties in the room. Anyway, we'll see y'all. And no, I wasn't talking about you, Coach Jack. I was talking about when you join the militia. Make sure that you answer the questions. So everybody, peace out, shine on, and we'll see you hopefully Saturday. Hopefully we'll see you Friday at Maggie at the festival. But yeah, you can watch it. You can scroll back and watch it from the beginning. And in fact, Kojak, if you're just getting started in the hobby, go back maybe a month's worth of episodes and start watching and learning. If you've not done it yet, it's there's a lot of good education to be had. And if you have any questions, I'll be here on Wednesday nights and Saturday nights. Till then, y'all take care, shine on, and have a great weekend if I don't see you.